and welcome to the Thursday, February 16th, 2023 regular meeting of the school committee. I would ask for those who are here in attendance to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome everybody. Our first, is that? It's on. Okay, thank you. First order of business is public comment. I do not believe we have any public comment here. Okay, then are there any recognitions that people would like to share with the public?
I do. I would like to shout out to our crossing guards. I went on a very poor mission to get both of their names and I could not get them, but I wanted to say thank you to them. They're excellent. They make my life better in just a number of ways. And they are out there when it's -12 or whether it's 90. They're awesome. And I hope that they know that because their job is dangerous and sometimes I see them get yelled at, but I very much love them. So.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, then that moves us right into reports. Robert, you are up first.
All right. So these past couple weeks have been very spirited inside of the high school. The hallways were decorated with hearts, and you couldn't make a turn without seeing red or pink decorations on the lockers. Also, both candygrams and flowergrams were exchanged within all 4 grades, which also kind of run as fundraisers for all the grades. Also this week, the 9th grade had their first Respecting Human Identity seminar for the 2nd semester. The topics that were presented were the key to authentic and healthy relationships and emotional intelligence was presented on Tuesday. And then presented today was a presentation on Black History Month and the Harlem Renaissance. Tonight, the Honors Art Exhibition starts at the HCA and will run through March 1st. 10 high schoolers, students have had their have their art pieces in the show. And then for future plans, the science fair is set to begin on the Tuesday after February break. Also happening that week will be apple testing on March 1st and 2nd. Students who signed up to hopefully get their seal of bioliteracy will be taking it. And winter sports are already wrapping up. Both hockey and basketball are in the playoffs. And then the course selection for the 2023 and 2024 year will begin on March 7th. Information on that will be sent after the vacation by Mr. Bishop.
Excellent. And you will not be doing course selection this year.
I know, weird, huh? Yeah, I won't.
That's great. Any questions or comments for Robert?
No, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Appreciate a lot going on at the high school.
Yeah, busy week.
One more day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hold my breath.
You can tell the teacher in our group.
Don't know what you're talking about.
All right, that then moves us into the superintendent's
All
report.
right, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for Thursday evening, February 16th, 2023. It should be a very quick superintendent's report today.
It's a very jazzy intro slide. Just sounds like we're supposed to have to say something.
Yeah, thank you. It's very Valentine's feeling.
Yes,
today.
yep.
I wanted to share with you the names of the students who were accepted into central districts. This comes to you from Craig Hay. So we have Reese Amagood, Aritro Chatterjee, Mei Chen, Jackson Chen, Simrit Kukreja, Yuli Kwan, Pranav Laki Reddy, Emily Liu, Alexander Luter, Noah Martin, Leah Hong, Joshua Kim, and Thomas Pan, all of whom you can see the instruments that they qualified for on the right-hand side. So congratulations to all of those students.
A lot of strings.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I am duplicating Robert's report, letting you know that Science Fair will be on the 28th and the Seal of Biliteracy testing March 1 and 2. Because we're looking at the homeschooling policy tonight, there may be questions about how many kids are currently homeschooled in the Hopkinton Public Schools. And so I have those numbers available for you, and those numbers are actually pretty low comparative to where they have been in past years. So in first grade, we have 2 students. In grade 2, we have 2 students. Grade 3, there's 1. Grade 4, none. 1 in 5th grade, 2 in 6th grade, 2 grade, 1 in 8th grade. There are none in the 9th grade, 2 in the 10th grade, none in the 11th grade, and 2 in the 12th grade. And you should also know that technically there is 1 in K who must have turned 6 along the way this school year because compulsory education begins when you turn 6. So I have listed for you those 15, and that's where we are. I'm actually kind of proud of how low our number is, so.
Yeah, during COVID, it was in the 30s.
It had gone
Right.
up in the during COVID, yes.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know if it's 15 families or if it's
Oh,
fewer?
I don't know. I only have a grid that puts numbers in.
15 is a
I
low
could
number
certainly
anyway.
ask, Megan Cox, who keeps the real deep
No,
records.
that's okay. It's a little. I was just curious. I bet it's even probably lower in family count.
Sure,
is my
yes, I
guess.
would imagine. And I want to talk about enrollment again. So I used to do this fairly regularly, and I think that this is kind of a momentous occasion because we have finally hit 4,200 students. And when we were putting the budget together, you can see on this slide right here, we were planning on 4,078 students at the end of the 22-23 school year. And so right now we have already hit 4,200. I think another thing that's interesting here is that if you take a look at what's contributing somewhat to this, you can see that right now in the integrated preschool we have 170 kids fully enrolled and 3 who are pending. So that number goes to 110. When we add that to the 4090, we get the 4,200. But I think an interesting thing is that when we opened Marathon School in 2018, we had 58 students in the integrated preschool, and now we're up to 110. So people will say, when you open those 4 new classrooms at Marathon, is that going to mean that we're going to be increasing the number of kindergarten classrooms and first grade classrooms? But really the truth of the matter is that we've given a lot of our classrooms away to preschool classrooms. So there's a lot to think about, I think, in terms of space and in terms of students. And just one more time, when we have been budgeting, we've been using these numbers from Dr. Wagman. These are the ones that are cohort survival. And at the end of 22-23, the prediction was 4078, and when we budgeted this year for 23-24, we were using the 4160. And we always say that when we're looking at that 4160 that we anticipate that that's where you will be at the end of the school year. And to be honest, when you get to the end of the school year, very often you'll have a little bit of a drop in the number because kids who are leaving the Hopkinton Public Schools will announce that they are. But then you start to see that creep up again because the kids who are joining the Hopkinton Public Schools will start to appear. Lots of times if you're leaving, your parents will withdraw you in June, but they won't. The parents who are incoming don't necessarily enroll until August. So there is a period of flux in the summer. So this is the cohort survival graph, but if we take a look at the graph that does cohort survival and new housing students, the 23-24 number, do I have that right? Yeah, it just goes up a little bit to 4186. So I'm not sure that it would be super helpful, but it might be a little bit helpful to start using those numbers when we budget, because it feels like those are a little bit more accurate.
Yeah, one question. Should we get some help, get some thought behind if we have to have this high density housing, what is the projected number of students that we may see as an influx for that? Now that we have to have it, since it won't be right away, maybe we can have someone come in and give us a little bit of a thought of, okay, we're gonna get probably, this many students incoming out of that many housing units.
Yeah, we could call our old friend Dr. Wagman again and see if he would like to return to Hopkinton.
Because I think it would be nice to have that before the housing units are up, so we can budget accurately.
Yes. Yeah, he's done a good job for us, and I think when we looked at the demographer from the MSBA, their numbers were pretty much in sync,
Yeah.
the two of them. So I think when you hire a demographer that looks through all of those criteria, you're typically in a better place. Not just cohort survival, but even birth rates and things like that.
Also, in terms of looking at our capital projects, the potential for 750 new housing units coming into town would certainly
Huge.
be
Yes.
a large impact. And I know that they wouldn't be coming in immediately, and we don't know at what date people would be building and ultimately occupying, but there is the potential for that.
A few years ago, so I don't know if the statistic holds, but we did some research on what's the average number of students in each household in Hopkinton, and it was 0.6. So that's
More than a whole
significant
grade.
number. Yes, it sure is. All right, just a very quick Elmwood update. Tonight, the select, you'll be voting on site and schematic, and on the 28th of February, the select board will be doing the same. So the ESBC2 had a meeting on Monday evening where they chose the site and schematic, and the two boards just need to endorse it. So people should know this is not the vote that says, yes, we're going forward with the Elmwood School project, but it is the vote that says we are endorsing the work of ESBC2. We're happy with the site and the schematic that they have chosen. It was really a super fun meeting. Like, I think spirits were very high on Monday night.
They're always fun.
And then wishing everyone a happy February vacation, which we can remind you is, yes, just one day away. All right.
Are there questions, comments for Dr. Kavanaugh's report? I just want to comment on the enrollment numbers. That 4,200 feels like a big shift in terms of how quickly we're climbing up there. I know that for those who were able to also watch the select board meeting, they are looking towards the comprehensive budget, and one of the things they had asked about in their meeting, not to me because I wasn't physically there, but was about whether or not we'd be able to appreciate any staffing savings, staff that we might not need that we have budgeted for already. I do have concerns about that, just given that we're climbing at a rate that we didn't budget for. So I know on the 28th, the select board is having a meeting on their comprehensive budget, and I have reached out to see if they want to have it as a joint meeting and have us there, because our budget is certainly part of that. I'm waiting just to hear back on that, but they have asked if there are any savings that we thought we could appreciate. It's not on the agenda for tonight, so we can't deliberate on that, but certainly something to keep in mind that the select
Did
board
they give
maybe.
a number? Or no, it's
They-
just
they-
like, if this is something you can do, it would be lovely. Is
The directive, I think, from the town manager to the select board was to look at departments that had gone over what the guidance was, or
Okay.
certainly as one of those departments. And part of the discussion, it was not a specific number, but was about specifically how to find savings.
That makes sense.
And
Thank
yes, so that is more to come on that. So I don't know if anybody else had anything else on Dr. Kavanaugh's report. I will go then into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant S23016 has been approved. Warrants 23-0341, 23-042, 23-043, and 23-044 have been approved, all in the packet. On January 19th, 2023, executive session minutes from August 8th, 2022 were approved to release. And just wanted to give two other quick updates. One is that we are continuing to meet with the budget advisory group, so there may be more information coming forward from that. We met last Thursday. There was nothing there that would report out because it was before the select board meeting. And then today, Amanda and I met with the chair and the vice chair of CPAC to talk about our March 8th plan meeting. One thing that I had thought, and we haven't discussed here because we haven't had that opportunity, might be helpful for us to do in our meeting with CPAC would be to have a facilitator to really help us try to reset kind of how we're working with CPAC going forward, looking ultimately to formalize something with them, but to really try to work collaboratively with them and to get ourselves into a better place than I think the past few months have felt for all of us. The person who came to mind when I started thinking about facilitators is Tony Bent. I did reach out to him. He is available on March 8th. He certainly, the reason he popped out to me was because he, I think, has a great record of being able to bring different stakeholders together, take their individual opinions and work together. CPAC is going to consider if they would like somebody else or if they would like to explore him further, but so we will have more coming forward after the CPAC board has the opportunity to meet. And then if the facilitator is a different facilitator that's not able to meet on March 8th, there's the potential that we may need to shift the date a little bit. I feel like it's more important to get it right than it is to be wedded to a particular date. And by right, I mean just, I don't know that there's an absolute right, but there's not. But to be able to get us to the best possible place to bring the work forward on this road. So that is all I have for the chair report. Do people have any liaison reports or anything else that?
I'm pretty sure you're gonna hear what I would have for a
Your
liaison.
thunder gets stolen
I know,
because you guys
all the
work hard.
we're going to have policy too, so.
And policy too. I have one. There was an LPAC meeting last night. Really great group of parents that turned out. The LPAC really has grown since December of 2021 when they really started coming together. It's great. They've done some family events. This was an adult-only informational. There was a presentation that Jen Suker, our director of English language acquisition, equity and access. She did a great job with it and really is a great resource to families. So I look forward to having more to report out on that as they have more things planned.
Yes, and unsolicited, I would say that on the equity and access side too, she's constantly bringing people in and, you know, sort of helping them navigate the public schools, and she really does a nice job.
I would say if we could go back to recognitions, I was very impressed with how she ran that meeting last night. So. Okay, anybody? All right, then if there are no more liaison reports, that brings us into the Hopkinton High School Program of Studies. Mr. Bishop. Gives us extra time to talk high school first.
Who doesn't want to talk about that? Let's get set up here quick. All right. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to come and talk about the proposed changes to our program of studies. You know, I think you can tell a lot about what a school values and prioritizes by looking at their program of studies or their course catalog. And I'd like to think that we pride ourselves on putting students first and, you know, offering classes that students want to take and what they're interested in. And so, you know, I like to think we're innovative and ahead of the curve as well. And so those are all the things that we like to kind of put at the forefront when we make our decisions around the program of studies. It's a process that's always kind of evolving and happening. At the high school, teachers are always talking to each other, talking to their SMLs. SMLs are talking to administration. We're talking to groups of students, kind of about what's working in our different disciplines. What else do we need to offer? And those are the types of questions that we kind of bat around. And are we meeting all the diverse needs of all of our students? So that really kind of drives the work that we do when we talk about our program of studies. I want to thank all the SMLs for their work in contributing to this, as well as Mr. Palmerville and Ms. Tice. A lot of work goes into the program of studies. But ultimately, it's about student voice and choice. We talk a lot about that with our vision of the graduate, student agency, and I think it starts with the courses that you offer at the high school. So we have a few new course proposals, I think 5 in total. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some science fair changes that we're making for next year, some minor tweaks. We have some course levels that we're going to be adding to the program of studies, hopefully, as well as some courses that we're removing from the program of studies. And I think it's important to mention before we get into any of this that there's no funding that is needed to fund any of this. No increases are needed. As I think we know, of course, the way it works is we have quite a large program of studies, and we run the courses based on student interest. So there might be a year that a course has a lot of interest, we run it. The next year, not so much interest, we don't run it. And so that's how it pretty much works. Every once in a while, we'll take courses out of the program of studies for a variety of reasons. We have a few of those this year, which I'll explain. But that's usually how it works. So there's no funding needing. We have plenty of staffing for what we were looking to do, and I think we have some great new courses that we're going to be offering. So I'd like to talk a little bit about those. First is within our visual arts department, and speaking of recognitions, I just came from the Honors Art exhibit over at the HCA, so I would encourage you all to go over there. It's wonderful, some talented students. And this is another kind of real-world application course. So we're looking to add an introduction to architecture into our class. Yeah, right, it's awesome. We're really excited about that. Colleen Janino has really spearheaded that with Christine Enos, one of our teachers at the high school. It's a semester course, open to grades 9 through 12. It's for students to explore fundamentals of architecture through design drawing as well as modeling, and it serves students who are interested in architecture but also art and design, 3D design, engineering, and fabrication. So we do think that's going to be a pretty popular elective next year. Next, we're looking to add an advanced placement pre-calculus class. So this is a relatively new AP course that the College Board has put out for schools. The material covered in this course obviously is the pre-calculus curriculum designed by the College Board. So it's very similar in terms of rigor when it comes to AP to our other AP classes. It's open to 11th and 12th graders. And it's really designed for students who are ready to kind of make that jump and challenge themselves to take an AP class. Maybe they're not traditionally someone that's been on the accelerated math kind of pathway since the middle school, but maybe they've figured some things out sophomore or junior year. Maybe they want to get into engineering and they need to take a calculus class, a college-ready calculus class for that next level. And this gives those students an on-ramp to be able to take an AP class based on kind of the way our pathways work. So we are excited to be able to offer this. We have a teacher lined up who's very interested and wanting to teach it. So if approved, we'd be able to train them before the end of the school year for the fall. And it also gives students who are transferring into the high school, who may have not been part of our math program since the 7th grade, an opportunity to kind of jump in and take a higher level class as well. So that is a class that's hopefully going into our math department. And then a few science classes we're looking to add. The first is a junior-senior elective called the Physics of Sports. Very similar to our forensics course as well as Blue Planet. We have some one semester science electives for our upperclassmen. And it's basically what you'd think it would be. The students would be talking about all different types of sports, from golf, baseball, skiing, basketball, billiards. There's a list of sports on this here, where they'll talk a little bit about kind of the fluid nature of body movement, the extended body movements and mechanics, and through different ways, right? Through lab work, through videos, through simulations. So this was one of those classes we've heard a lot from students that they want more information about and they want to take it. And so Liz Petruska, one of our science teachers at the high school, is kind of spearheading this work. So we're excited about that offering as well for our upperclassmen. Also in our science department, we are looking to add a topics in biology class, which would be a second semester class for freshmen. And this class is designed to help some of our students get a little bit more skills and repetition and practice with the subject of biology to get them ready for the biology MCAS at the end of their sophomore year. So this would be a smaller group class. It would be kind of designed based on recommendations from the middle school science department as well as the counseling department at the middle school. And it would take the place of an intro to physics class for some of our students. So again, just for 9th graders in the second semester. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the science fair changes, which is a program I know we've talked about. We have our science fair at the high school on the 28th. And can't say enough about Miss Murphy and the work that she does. She's a tremendous educator. She spearheads our science fair program. She went through the program as a student as well here under Miss Lachansky. I know we all know her name. And so I've had a lot of conversations with her and with Miss Smith, who is our science department head. And the main reason we want to make some of these changes, and again, they're minor tweaks, is basically the growth of the program, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the numbers are significantly larger than they were 5-10 years ago. And through exit surveys and conversations that we've had with students and wanting to support some of the sophisticated projects that they want to do, the way we have it set up now is just not sustainable, and we need to adjust. I think we all know science fair requires a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources and space. So we're thinking these changes will help not only our most dedicated students to have some more in-school kind of research exploration opportunities, but hopefully at the end there'll be some either higher quality, believe it or not, projects is what the hope is for. So I would say, if I were to summarize the main changes, it's adding additional in-school opportunities for our students. So for freshman year, any student who wants to get involved in science fair, they take the Introduction to Chemistry with research methods. If a student is not interested in going into science fair, they would just take the traditional Introduction to Chemistry. So you know you're signing up for science fair if you take the with research methods. And so that class is currently set up that they take it 5 times out of a 7-day cycle. So the only change for freshman year is that we're going to be adding a 6th class period in 7 days. And within that 6th class period, they'll be meeting with Miss Murphy during their class period to work on their year-long project. Now that's happening a little bit after school, before school, during flex blocks, so it would be nice to have an actual class period for them during the school day to work on it. And that would take the place of a study hall opposite of their wellness class. Not to get too into the weeds, but just to, if you kind of want to understand where that class actually fits. Then we fast forward to sophomore year. We're hoping to add this new elective called Advanced Research Methods 1. It's a 1-semester course for 10th graders in the 2nd semester. So this class is really for students who are dedicated to science fair, who want more in-depth exploration with scientific research methods. They'll be doing intensive labs, they'll be doing journaling, they'll be doing weekly seminars. We have local scientists that plan on coming in to meet with the class, all with the hope of kind of finding out how scientists conduct their work, troubleshoot problems, analyze results, and the hope of this class is by the end of the semester they'll have their junior year science fair proposal set to Miss Murphy. Now, if a student is unable to fit this class in their schedule, that's okay. They can still work with Miss Murphy, just like we have done for many, many years on the side, as long as they propose a plan for their junior year, they can still go through the science fair on their junior year. So it's not a requirement, it just gives an opportunity for students to take an in-person class with even more kind of in-depth research methods and the skills that the students need for their project. And then junior and senior year is kind of advanced research methods 2 and 3, which is exactly what we're doing now. It's always been a 1-credit class that students work on their project with Ms. Murphy and the other advisors at different times, maybe after school, before school, during flex block. And so that model is not changing. So really, what we're doing is just adding 1 period to freshman year and offering an elective for those who want to really dig in a little bit deeper sophomore year. And then students in their junior year, and if they wanted to continue senior year, which usually is a smaller number, they're able to do the exact same thing that we're currently doing. Okay. So that is some of the science fair changes, and I'm happy to answer questions after we wrap it all up. I'm sure there's going to be a few. And then really quick, we're adding some additional course levels in our program of studies. You may be aware we have foundational levels in our English and math courses in 9th and 10th grade. In an attempt to meet the diverse needs of our student body and to give all students an option in different classes, we're adding foundational levels in some of our science classes and history, as well as in some 11th grade courses. Some of these classes are more smaller group, more individualized instruction, more skill building, more repetition, and usually those recommendations come from the previous year teacher. And then kind of wrapping up the changes to the program of studies, we do have a few course removals. Fab Lab is a course that's currently being offered in our visual arts department. That's going to be replaced with the Introduction to Architecture. We feel like Introduction to Architecture, just that term, will get more kids a little bit more recruited in. I think a lot of kids don't know what Fab Lab is when they sign up for classes. So we're hoping that change can help a little bit. HHS TV 2, that's more of kind of an enrollment. We have Jim Cousins, who's fantastic, who I think we all know here at HCAM. He teaches 1 section, and it's tough to do TV 1 and 2 in the same section, and we haven't seen the numbers really for HHS 2. So that might be something kids can do on an independent study basis and kind of learn a little bit more outside of the classroom with Mr. Cousins. Team robotics we're taking out of the program of studies, and that was initially put in, if you remember, was a requirement that students took the team robotics prior to COVID to be able to participate in robotics competitions after school. We have so many students participating in robotics and so many teams that is not something we've been able to commit to. So we actually haven't run team robotics for a number of years. So we're just going to finally take it out of our program of studies. And then the conceptual physics and understanding the earth have been low enrollment for a number of years, and that's where the idea of the physics of sports came in, to replace those classes with another elective that might get some energy and enthusiasm behind for students to want to take it. So yeah, so those are some of the changes to our program of studies, and I'm happy to answer your questions that you have.
Awesome. Somebody would like to jump in to start with any questions?
I love research I'm so happy you're doing research methods. It's like, I was a grad TA for a college, and they would have done well with foundational skills in high school, so I'm so happy to see something so useful for everyday life.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And to hear Ms. Murphy talk about the plan that she has for that class, it's really exciting.
Outstanding.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
I think the intro to architecture is really interesting. Architecture is such a involved, heavy, undergrad program, and most kids don't really have a sense for it other than they love architecture before they walk in. So to actually allow them to get a feel for kind of how intensive it can be and the numerous different ways you have to think to really do architecture in high school, I think it is a huge positive. I'm surprised about Fab Lab though. Like when my sons were in the school, there was always a queue.
Yeah.
People like begging to be in Fab Lab.
Yeah. So those numbers have come down a little bit, and it's the
Okay.
same teacher who would be doing both of those classes. So she was actually the one that was saying, I met with her and she met with Colleen Janino, our department head, and she said, I think this might add a little bit of juice to this class and maybe bring some numbers up. And there's a lot of similar stuff going on in
Yeah.
both classes, but she's able to do a little bit more in the introduction to architecture. So.
And then the other one I love is the sports physics, because I can totally see kids who may not otherwise like math and physics
Yeah,
being engaged. That's really good. So thank you so much for bringing all this. This is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add. I think it's great how much thought you and your staff put together when you put this together. The kids are lucky. They're lucky to have you and a diverse set of courses and, all these potential experiences that they could take with them when they graduate. So this is great. Thank you. I love how responsive you are to the students. And every year you come with, a list of new offerings that reflects, the changes in the world around us, the changes of interest in the kids, and we're so lucky for that. So I love that. Also love the architecture class. I think that'd be super fun. My only questions were, I think you touched on them because I sent them beforehand. I was curious about the AP Pre-Calc. What do we offer for Pre-Calc? And
Sorry.
do we also offer honors or
Yeah, so we do have an honors pre-calc and a college prep pre-calc.
Okay.
So those will still be offered as well. It just gives another layer of that. If a student is maybe if they've taken honors algebra 1, honors geometry, and then honors algebra 2, freshman, sophomore, junior year, generally they would go into either an honors pre-calc or a CP pre-calc, and now it just gives them another option to take an AP class.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what I think is exciting for those kids who will take it is if they sort of matured as students a little bit, later, whether it's their connection with math or even just being sort of self-motivated in that way that an AP student has to be. It really is a college course. So it's not only about knowing the subject, but also how you are as a student and what kinds of supports you need.
Yeah.
So if you are that kid who's ready for pre-calc, but you're also ready for that college level work, I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's important we have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And I think we have pathways. We don't necessarily have tracks, but I think a lot of students will kind of stay on the same level most of the time.
Yeah.
I talking to counselors constantly about how sometimes it just clicks. And it might be a little late, and then it's like, oh, I'm a little into this math pathway. How do I kind of get to where I want to get to at this point? And sometimes we offer doubling up on math, which is really hard to be able to get to a certain level of calculus. And so this just gives us another opportunity. So when Carla Crucifulli, who brought this to my attention initially, my first reaction was like, another AP class, we're feeding into this more stress. And then I realized this is actually more of an on-ramp for a lot of kids. I was very excited to put this in the program of study.
And if you're that student who's ready for this, then being able to test your skills as a college learner, those sort of student self-management skills in high school is great. So I love that. My other questions were so much is happening with the science fair. I love the science fair, and Murray's amazing. I think what she does, it's unbelievable, and people who help her. My only concern was access, for kids who want the 11 and 12 grade research methods, but it's outside of school hours. So
And that's always typically is now.
right.
Yeah, because so right now they take the class freshman year, and then
Yeah.
a lot of the work is done with that one credit outside of school working with Miss Murphy. So that wouldn't necessarily change, it's giving them another opportunity to have some in class. And there wouldn't be any, and I hope I said this before, that if you can't take the elective, you can still do the science
can still
fair
do
junior
it.
and senior year, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that we want to make sure that's known for folks, and so, because, everybody's doing a lot of different things. They might have the robotics, they might have band, they might have business they want to take, so you can't take everything. And so it's important that we give students the opportunity to be able to do that. They would just have to work with Ms. Murphy or any other advisors to kind of propose that project for junior year. So generally, what we're looking for is students to do a project freshman year, kind of have a lot of students get involved in it, get a taste of it, and then get ready to do kind of a little bit more sophisticated project junior, and then maybe carry on to senior year. And so that's really kind of the model that we're looking for. And most students who are involved in this typically do 2 big projects, because research takes quite a bit of time. And so that's how it usually goes. And so we're hoping this doesn't hurt any of our numbers at all, just maybe giving students a little bit more opportunity within the school day to do some of this work, because I think everybody has a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Like today I went down, I saw the science fair doing their prep for their presentation. I saw 50 plus kids in the robotics. I saw the art show kids getting ready. It's just a lot, which is great. And Robert kind of touched upon all the things that are going on. So you just can't do everything.
So my only other question is, because these are so popular, do we have assistants? Are you at a comfortable place where we can support? There are literally hundreds of kids who do between robotics, BPA, science fair. I mean, this is a lot of kids.
It is, and it's a lot of work on the adults that are involved.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of conversations with them, and they're very good at letting me know if we do need additional support. I think I came not long ago and asked for an additional science fair advisor, and I actually think this model will help that. It won't be as much after school, who's available, kind of bringing kids in. There'll be a lot more working directly with Miss Murphy within the school day, which I think will help a little bit with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So I would want to echo what my colleague said before. I guess I really was thinking, as you were talking, first, how exciting all these courses are that you're able to bring to our students, how vibrant the course offerings are. Every year you talk about a couple of classes and I think, wow, I wish I could have done that and had that opportunity when I was in high school. I love, like a couple people said, how you look at student interest, you look how things shift, and I was just reflecting back on how many things you've come before us, not just course offerings, but where you really have taken into account shifting student needs, and really how you work very closely with the students. And I don't think that's probably true in every high school, so we are very fortunate to have that. Also really appreciate your lens on access, both here in looking at access with offering things so that people can do science fair stuff during the school day. You know, back to when we were talking about the Flex Block, I think that was last year. It feels like a long
I know,
year.
it feels like a long
But
time.
it just, it's much appreciated. The science fair is exciting. I'm happy to be going on the 28th and see that. So
Awesome.
thank you very much for bringing all that.
Yep. Certainly a team effort, that's for sure.
Well, you've got a good team there.
We certainly do. We certainly do. Lucky.
So if there are no other questions or comments, I think we would look for a motion to approve the high school program of studies.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, so motion by Jen and a second by Holly. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye, and it is unanimous, so thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate you coming
Thank you
out.
for your support. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
One more day, Mr. President.
One more. So that brings us into the Elmwood schematic design endorsement. We have with us the Elmwood School, the building committee, the chair and the vice chair, if you guys want to come on up. I was just having a panic moment to make sure we had the right number of chairs.
We're good.
You're good.
Very excited to have seen your discussion on, was it Monday night? It really is, you guys have done some really great things, and I will let you go with your presentation.
Awesome. All right. So good evening, everybody. We have been working on the Elmwood Building project since July of 2022. And this is a really big milestone for us as we share with you tonight our recommendation for the site selection. So if we can go to the next slide. So with the support of our project management team and our design team, we created evaluation criteria to help us determine the site viability. In addition, we asked for the input of our visioning team, which was a community group comprised of more than 25 community members with varying stakeholders present who helped us decide the exact criteria. And in fact, with their support, we added criteria to this list. It's pretty thorough. There are 17 criteria that we have considered. And with the visioning committee, we really nailed the priorities to be traffic, net zero, achievability, and cost. So using the criteria listed, we whittled down the most advantageous sites to 2 particular locations, which originally were on Elm Street and Hayden Row. And tonight we are recommending that we move forward with the Hayden Row East site plan. So if we can go to the next slide. So we are looking for your endorsement of this site location, and we're really excited because this is the remaining part of the parcel that's connected to Marathon School. So the new Elmwood School would be built on the eastern side of this parcel. It's previously known as the Todaro site, and on this slide actually you can see Marathon School up on the top of the slide. If we go to the new one, great. So at this new site location, we believe that there's going to be ample play space for students to support physical education and recess, with more outdoor features being available for learning as well, like a rain garden, outdoor courtyards, and we're hopeful that this additional space on the lot will also support car curating, so that we can take cars off of Hayden Row and queue them up for parent drop-off as parents bring their children to school every day. And additionally, at our last meeting, we were really pumped because we are further exploring the opportunity for walking paths to increase walkability to Elmwood School, which again would remove more cars off of Hayden Row. Additionally, the location supports opportunity for further growth, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that on the next slide. So this is the particular design that the team has also endorsed. It's called the Hayden Rowe Village Plan. And we expect that the academic programming will thrive in this type of model, design model. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So we selected the village model, which is called HR7, pictured here to be the building design. It has three wings with about 6 classrooms in each wing. The specialized support, such as English language teachers, speech therapists, special educators, and other instructional spaces will actually be embedded within each hallway, which would maximize student inclusion and ease of getting to services if a student does need to access a support outside of the classroom. Additionally, the village would support each wing to feel like a smaller neighborhood. We've heard some concern about people sharing, like, this school is going to be so big. And we hear you. There will be more students than are at the Elmwood School right now, especially with an additional grade. But we're confident that this neighborhood style will still permit students to feel safe, comfortable, and connected because we'll have common meeting spaces and learning spaces within each node. That's what they call those little spikes, a learning node. It's also important to point out that the visioning team had recommended that they really wanted the media center to be the heart of the school. So right here on the main floor, you'll notice where the little arrow is that the media center really will be in the main part of the design, and we hope to be a feature as we move forward. One other thing we wanted to point out, we had several design plans here, and when we show you the evaluation matrix, you'll notice that there were 6 Hayden Rowe options, I believe, right, John? We could have picked any of them. They would have been spectacular. They really would have been. But this one spoke to us for many reasons. But one thing that we have heard is a hardship is the traffic inside the building. So when you think about adding additional kids inside the building, it's important to be sure that those high traffic areas are separated and distant from one another in some way. So we think with having the gym on one side of the school and that cafeteria and stage on the other will permit a better traffic flow inside for students as well. And this also provides additional safety and security measures for the staff in the building, for people accessing the building. And we really felt like this would help us to ensure the safety of all those who attend this school.
And can I just, sorry.
Yes.
The other nice thing about this design where you have, while the gym and cafeteria are separate, you'll notice that the sort of public spaces, the ones that the public might use, are separated from the academic wings. So if you're using it on a weekend for basketball or something like that, it's very easy for people to access the gym while we can secure those academic wings. So you don't have that sort of integrated throughout the school as you do maybe at some other buildings.
And I did want to call to your attention, I had mentioned it on the slide before, but if you notice at the end of each of these wings, there's just some dotted lines. That's actually the area where we have additional opportunity for growth. So if at some point we need to add on 4 more classrooms, build an additional piece of a wing, those dotted lines show you where we could actually build additional space. So this lot has lots of space for us to do that if necessary in the future.
And the plan is a maximum of 18, right? So 6 in each wing.
6 in each wing.
That's quite a bit of growth that we can have.
Yes, and lots of growth. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit further into the evaluation criteria that I talked about earlier. I just wanted to explain what the coloring was for everybody. So the darkest green color would be considered like the most advantageous. The light green color was a bit less. The yellow would be considered a neutral factor for us to consider. Orange starts to show less favorability or less advantageous, and then the red is least advantageous. So we went through each criteria and we rated them as a team. We did have some debating, which is good because we want to do what's best for our town. So this some were quite easy and others we really rumbled with. But when you look at this criteria matrix, now that it's completed, it all on the left-hand side are the Elmwood sites. And so you could see how it just right away, just from a brief look, that it was a bit least advantageous. But again, that the Hayden Rowe sites, although there's always pros and cons, we don't believe there's any perfect site, that they definitely were most advantageous to the work we want to do. Did we want to talk at all about the constraints at Elmwood other than?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you dive into the red and orange, you'd kind of see this show up. But really, one of the biggest factors that made Hayden Row a lot more attractive than Elmwood is Elmwood has enough room for us to build a brand new school next to the existing school. It has literally no more room than that. So when we got into things like where would we stage construction, what would it be like for the students to go to school at the current Elmwood school while a new school was being built? We even talked about the fact that at a certain stage of the project in Elmwood, you might lose the existing parking and we'd have to shuttle people over from an off-site parking location. If we had to relocate any students or classes or anything like that, that's additional cost that would be on top of it for having to rent temporary classrooms, and we couldn't figure out where they'd go anyway. So it really, the site constraints made it really challenging to think about Elmwood as compared to Hayden Row, which gives us, just by the nature of, you can see there are 6 building options here. They probably could have come up with more. There's a huge amount of buildability on the site. The location in terms of where it is in relation to Marathon, where it is in terms of relation to Hayden Row, were all kinds of flexible options that we had with that site. So I think that was the main driver for selecting the site.
For sure. So we'll talk about some other specific criteria that we think is important, including cost and traffic.
Yeah, I do the short straw on that one. So cost. I doubt anybody's going to be able to read that slide from all the way over here, but what you would see on the slide is, from a cost perspective, as is kind of the normal process, we got 2 cost estimates done for the project. And we use 2 estimators. One is chosen by our owner's project manager, Vertex, formerly Compass. The other one is chosen by our design firm, Perkins Eastman. The good news is, as is not always the case in these processes, all of their estimates came in very, very close to each other. So we didn't have to do a lot of back and forth of trying to understand which of the estimates were better. So between these 2 firms. If you look across, what we're showing here is the estimated cost of the project in its entirety without any MSBA reimbursement. The bottom line, the all the way bottom row shows the high-end range for the total project budget. And what this includes right now is a full net zero building, so fully geothermal, with as many wells as we could, dig on the site. It includes all of the soft cost multipliers, so like all of the things on top of construction that would happen in there. And then it actually also includes if we were to choose a construction manager at risk method for running this project, which is slightly more expensive, but gives us a little bit more flexibility in the process. For context, we did Marathon School as a construction manager at risk, and it allowed us to get some early bids. It allowed us to kind of get ahead on the timeline a little bit. The lower number is assuming if we went with a general contractor, all decisions that will be made as we go through this process. But the end result is almost all of these projects, if you take out the swing space, which are those modulars that we might need to rent if we did Elmwood, all come in the range of somewhere between 160-ish and $175 million. We all had the same reaction when we saw the numbers the first time, but the factors, as I know you are all aware, are one, if you compare this to previous projects, this is a whole other grade, so it's a much bigger building. A lot of the net zero opportunities are great, but they're expensive. And then the final piece is just inflation. For context, we built Marathon at $425 a square foot. Their estimates right now put this at somewhere in the low 800s per square foot. And that is just simply market inflation as they compare to other projects. So there's not really a lot we can do about that. This number, though, is an estimate, and as we get into the detailed design, this number will get better and better. Well, it'll get tighter and tighter.
More specific.
And we'll be able to make some decisions that hopefully will try to keep this cost as under control as we can. And then I think the last sort of tactical piece on this is traffic. For those of you who have followed our meetings, you know that traffic has been a major topic. One of our committee members, Mike Shepard, actually initially said he was not in favor of the Hayden Row site until we could really get some understanding of the traffic mitigations that could occur. I think a lot of us felt that way because a lot of us have been on Hayden Row at school drop-off and pickup time, and it's not a lot of fun. So how could we think about adding another school? We have engaged early with our traffic engineer. So typically the traffic engineering study process wouldn't have even started by now. It would start after we submit the PSR following the site selection. But recognizing that this was such a critical issue, Perkins Eastman and our traffic engineers, VHB, have started the work early on this. They've done a lot of observations, and the biggest conclusion that he came away with was this is absolutely doable without negatively impacting traffic. A couple of the ways that we know of right now, as Tiffany mentioned, we've picked a site that's further back into the lot so that we can build more road, so that we can take more cars and buses off of the road when it comes to queuing. They are also going to look at the traffic situation across that entire stretch of Hayden Row from Main Street all the way down to the light at Chestnut. Now, I'm saying this for anybody watching. This school project is not going to actually make changes to up Hayden Row, down Hayden Row, places away from the school, but we can, as a town, get recommendations as a part of this traffic study that might help those other parts, of the high school, middle school drop-off, pickup, whether it's time adjustments, whether it's other things they could do physically to the roadways that might mitigate the traffic overall. And as we get more, into more detail, some of our conversations have already gone this way. We also might see some advantages from the fact that we are bringing these schools closer together, and there's a lot of traffic that goes from Marathon to Elmwood or vice versa. We also have a lot of buses that are going all the way across town, all the way across to Elmwood that won't be now, and they'll actually be just going to one stop, dropping kids off at that one campus. So there's a lot of work to do. You'll note that when it comes to traffic on the site matrix, we gave all of them an orange, which is not advantageous. We think that we can make this, we really are confident that we can make this an issue, a non-issue for this school, but we want to recognize that it is something that we need to spend a significant amount of focus time on.
One question.
Yeah.
If I recall from Monday, the traffic engineer said it would be less than 10% increase in traffic during the heaviest hours. Was that what he said?
So one thing he pointed out was by adding a school at Hayden Row, it adds to like a peak drop-off and
Right.
pickup time, but rather we wouldn't see traffic there all day long. It wouldn't increase the traffic over the course of the day, rather just in small spurts of the day. But additionally, he did share that in their the tracking that they've done so far, that it's likely it wouldn't be, I think he said 170 cars more in total, because we're assuming that many families have more than one child within the school system. So they might be dropping off at Marathon and going to Elmwood. They might be doing Elmwood to Hopkins, and they're accessing Hayden Row already. So he said it was about 170 cars, I believe.
170 in peak hour, in a peak hour. And what he's done so far is simply accounting. So he's done accounting at Marathon, Hopkins, the middle and high school, and he's done accounting at Elmwood, and he's basically taken the cars at Elmwood and said, what if they were going to be here? We know that that's not a one-to-one. And so those are some of the things that he's going to look into a little bit more deeply in terms of what is actually going to be that additive traffic.
But he was confident in sharing that if there was a longer lane for queuing and thinking about the design of a new school, if we could figure out more of queuing outside of Hayden Row, then we would likely be able to lessen the traffic and the effects of adding 170 cars during peak time.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too, when we built Marathon, we talked about trying to build that roadway to maximize the queuing that could occur there too, but we were limited by the town didn't own all of those parcels of land in front, and some of them the town does own now, and there were some wetland challenges that made the driveway not the optimal design to take as many cars off the road as we had wanted to. Again, this is going to give us a lot more roadway to work with because we're pushing back further into the site.
We also, in talking about the particular location where the school is, the walkability, the neighborhoods, we had talked a little bit about Briarcliff and Blueberry, which are pretty populated parts of our town. So we're hopeful if we really could work that in, that would also decrease the traffic.
Okay, so timeline-wise, we are, the PSR schedule that we have here, our submission is due to the MSBA on March 2nd. I'll just note, first of all, I want to thank both the work of, obviously, the district staff, Perkins Eastman, Vertex. We chose an incredibly aggressive schedule to get to this point because we wanted to, because the MSBA only does these approvals at their board meetings. So if you miss one, you're backed out for at least a quarter. And so we really wanted to stay on track so that, because we know this is a need and we want to get this thing built as quickly as we can. So it's been a lot of work by, professional staff to get an education plan done, redone, to get all of these designs that were tweaked every time we had a meeting and had 800 suggestions. So we've just got a great team working towards this. We voted on Monday as an ESBC for the preferred schematic option, which we've shown to you, that is known as Hayton Row 7 East. And then here we are looking for your vote to endorse our option recommendation so that we can make that a part of our submission to the MSBA. On the 28th of February, we'll be going to the select board and asking them for the same. We will then, as an ESBC, approve the final preferred schematic report to be submitted to the MSBA on March 2nd. And then we will enter the next phase of our process, which is where we get into the more of the design of the school.
So we're open for questions or comments if anybody has any.
I wanted to make a comment.
Yes.
So at our previous vote, I abstained, but I wanted to clarify because I've gotten questions from members of the community. I think that what you guys have chosen and what you guys have done is outstanding. I agree that it is clearly the best thing for our community. I've listened to your exhaustive commentary on traffic planning, cost mitigation. Like, it is clear that it's like a dream team working on this, and I want to thank you for all the work and my colleagues, the administration, all the people that have worked on this, because it's very clear that this is going to benefit our district for decades, and I think it's largely due to the people that have done this exhaustive work, right? I sat in one of the public forums, I usually watch them, and it was like, traffic? What about traffic? Have you thought about it? Have you thought about traffic? And I was like, oh boy, they did. They thought about it. But thank you. And I want to say thank you too. Thanks. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the administration, because it is very clear that this is what our community needs. And that's because of the work of all of you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to share is part of the reason that we changed with the gym and the cafeteria split up like that is that we shared some of the concerns of the Hopkins teachers to the group. And so that went back to the designers and they split that up. So we are also taking, the concerns of the people who are in the building seriously when we look at this.
That's also clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting too that will the voice of the educators who are going to be in this building will continue to be key, and actually even more key as we get to the next phase. I mean, Ms. DeBow is here, and she can tell us firsthand that as we get into designing these educational spaces, it is the staff in the building that's really going to tell the designers how things need to be laid out, what it's going to take to make this the great building that it's going to be. So their continued feedback is what's going to make this building what it is.
Yep.
Can I just ask you, does that start after the March submission? Like, in terms of when does that, I've been asked by other people, when does the sort of design of the inside really begin? Or the decisions even around like energy, geothermal, hybrid, or, you know, which of the options of, when does that all happen? Is it after March?
Yeah, it's after March. It's probably the easy way to answer. Somewhere between March and November. But
It'll be done
the,
before the town meeting,
So
for those who know the price, right?
it will be an ongoing process. When we get to annual town meeting, it'll be a bit more focused. It won't be all the way there yet. Like, for example, I think when it comes to HVAC and mechanical systems, I believe that those decisions are going to be made in the summer. So we might, I'm not saying we won't have discussions about them, we won't have refined those, but we probably won't have final decisions about, are we going full geothermal net zero, are we going hybrid geothermal, and what the impact on cost is for that. You know, in terms of the detailed design, it's all going to sort of kick off after March and go through. I don't know. I don't even think our project managers know the exact order of the decisions that will need to be made. But
That's kind of my answer that I've been giving, so I'm glad that you're, you know, sort of, like, I found the window, but I don't really know the exact when. And I was just referring to the special town meeting, not this May,
Right.
but next
Yeah.
November.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we come to the November special town meeting, we will be coming with an exact appropriation, so we will know 100% what this building is going to cost to construct it. Yes.
Thank you. That sets a good window for people to know.
And we'll continue to have community forums, faculty forums. The faculty actually always has their forum first, which helps to inform the community forum and our planning. So we'll continue to do that. And then we'll continue to have surveys, having our meetings here at HCAM so anybody can watch them. And of course, participate, hopefully.
I would just like to say, I was lucky enough to be on the visioning committee, so I'm really excited to see the media center. I was at your meeting when you voted this. I'm excited. I think you guys have done a fantastic job of really taking on board a ton of information, feedback. I mean, you've been iterative in this whole process. Everything's been evolving. It was a really tight schedule because we were off cycle with the MSBA to begin with because of COVID. So it's been a crunch. I had a huge number of concerns about how were we going to let the community know what was going on, like way best last summer, and somehow you guys have surpassed my expectations on forums and accessibility, the website. In this particular model, I love the I really like it. I love the location that you've picked for all the reasons that you said. Security on this design. I appreciate the fact that the public is sort of up front, and the academic wings are in the back. I love that we can extend because we're looking at our enrollment numbers and we know, although we hate to consider more construction, it's good to know that we have that option. We don't want to be locked in. So I just can't say enough thank yous to you for the work you are doing and you will continue to do, and you guys going to all the meetings and all of these meetings and every other meeting, and you all, and Mr. Person, who seems to be everywhere. So I'm very much in favor of what you've decided. I think, I couldn't ask for a better outcome from the work that you've done and better justification. It's been very thorough.
Yeah, I have to say, one of the things I've been really impressed with is the differing points of view. Like how well everyone's expressed themselves, and how we've really, heard from so many different sides of the town, right? And how we even have representation from so many different sides of the town in the committee. I think that's been really good because everything has had to be very thoughtful. So I'm super happy where we ended up. I've loved this design from the beginning because it's like a house, right? Like people come and visit and they see all the public areas, and then all your private areas are nicely hidden in the back.
And the setback is nice too. I think for the neighbors, for the traffic concerns, for all those reasons, there's some cost, but the setback for this particular model was compelling for me too.
And I think the teachers can really find interesting uses for those courtyards.
Yeah.
I really like the spaces between the outdoor spaces.
I want to mention Mr. Caballo is on Zoom.
Oh, great. Thank you. So, echo what everybody has said. I really do appreciate that you have moved this at the the rate you have and been able to get it out into the community with all the forums and everything. At the beginning of our meeting, Dr. Kavanaugh was talking about enrollment. We've hit 4,200. We are ahead of where we expected to be. So wherever I was, when you started all of this, and my concerns about enrollment probably doubled that about now. It's everything that you guys have selected, I do really love. I know that the cost is definitely going to be a factor for the town. I know when we're looking at the numbers without considering the MSBA contribution back to us, it's a little more shocking. But I think the other side of the cost is when you look at the square foot construction and how that's gone up, we have these kids, we know there are more kids coming, we know there's potentially 750 additional units of housing, high density housing going to be built. If we don't move forward with this, it's hard to imagine what we will do, because we surely do not have the space, and this will alleviate, the 2 to 4 design will alleviate upstream a little bit. So thank you. Dr. Kavanaugh, I know.
Sure. So I just wanted to acknowledge the visioning team. We reached out to them, all of them, and we said, you should come out tonight because it's a really exciting evening. The school committee will be endorsing all of the work that the ESBC2 has done. And so we do have 2 visioning team members here tonight. And thank you for all of your work alongside, everyone else who's been doing the work. Do you want to identify yourself?
Amy Barber, a student. I have a child in both Marathon and Melbourne.
And David Simpson, I have a 4-year-old and a 8-month-old.
So you will be beneficiaries.
Sure, students will benefit, yeah.
Yes. So thanks the 2 of you and all of your colleagues who served on that team.
Awesome.
Can I mention one quick thing too? I'm sorry, I don't. We should end with that. I know we should end with that, but I think when this goes out to the community, I hope a lot of times when the independent reports on our meetings, this matrix that was put together by the committee is just, it speaks volumes for the decision that was made with the site and the reasoning behind the site. Those criteria on the side were at the forefront of the visioning committee, which was a group of community members who came forward and said, this is what we care about for this school. So I think this matrix is, I hope that will sort of be at the forefront of the report that comes out to the community. Whoever decides at the Independent to watch this and report on it, I hope you pick this matrix up and put that at the forefront, because this really is, the community has spoken, and this is kind of where we're going. And I think it's not like a small group of people just decided we were going to pick this site, and and this was like a huge team effort led by you both. You've put in so many hours, so thank you. And I really think it's important that folks know it wasn't made in a vacuum. Even though it would be easier, right? As John has said a few times. And that this is a huge community effort. Lots and lots of folks have come in and voiced their opinions, and this is how we landed. So I think it's great. Thank you.
We'd be happy to send them a copy if they want to print it.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe an
in
insert
color.
into the weekly.
Yes, that's great.
I know you had said Mr. Kamala is on there. I don't know if on the Zoom. Yeah. Are there any comments that you would like to make, Mr. Kamala?
Thank you. Through the chair, I want to commend the effort of the ESBC2 committee and all the subcommittees that they worked with. They've done a very beautiful job. And in fact, Dr. Kavanaugh and John, I was hoping that the school committee vote today will use squares and tiles. Otherwise, I'm here to commend the effort.
The tiles, I think he's referring to the
Oh,
vision.
yeah.
Tiles that were back, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
All right, I think then we are prepared, unless anybody has any other questions or comment, to entertain a motion to endorse the ESBC's recommendation for the preferred Elmwood replacement option.
So moved.
A motion by Leah, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jen, all those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing your presentation again at the select board meeting on the 28th.
On the 28th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the time that I know this goes into. You guys have a heavy lift there. Much appreciated. Okay, then we want to go into policy IHBG, home education? This is a first reading. Dr. Cavanaugh, did you want to?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So you will see that we are taking a look tonight at the home education policy. And the primary reason for doing that tonight is that we recognize that there were some things in our policy that were not legal. For instance, you cannot compel families to come in for a meeting. We always welcome them in if they want to talk about how homeschooling and what curriculum and instruction and assessment might look like, but we can't compel them. And our policy, as it's written now, does that. So, and you can take a look at all of the other changes that we've made in there. You know, we've redlined a few things, but I think that the other things that are redlined are pretty much just kind of mechanics.
Do we have any community feedback on that?
We did not.
Anything from our policy working group?
Maybe only that we had a couple of folks take a look at this in the central office too, right, Dr. Cavanaugh?
Yes.
So, yep. So, you know, we think based on the information that we have and the things that we are sort of obligated to do as a district, this is the way to go.
Yes, I think credit should really go to Mr. LeBrod, who is the assistant superintendent, under whom homeschooling falls. So,
much appreciated. We typically go through multiple readings on a policy. I don't know if you're looking because there's a legal for us to move this forward tonight, or what. Whenever I hear that we're out of compliance with.
Technically, I don't think it's not written that it's compelling, that you have to make an appointment. It is written that you should. Does it actually say that?
well, it says at the time of submission, the home educator should schedule an appointment with the superintendent's office. The purpose of this meeting will be to ensure that home educators and school administrators have mutual understanding concerning the methods that will be used to assess student educational. And the word should might mean that we'd like you to do that, but you don't necessarily have to. But I think that the way that it's worded does make people feel like they must, and they really don't have to if they don't wish to.
Right. But I mean, in practice, if
Okay,
somebody
and-
said, I'm not comfortable with that, I don't think I have to come in,
We could
we
certainly
honor
say, of
that.
course.
So if we
Yes.
wanted to give it a second reading, I think we could. I think. I don't know. Do you think so?
It's entirely up to you. I mean, I don't think that this is an urgent policy right now, but I also think we should make some kind of change to the language to make it reflect what is truly in the spirit of the law.
And also, we had a lot of discussion around this and the law as well. It was a topic that, you know, at least I personally hadn't been connected with. I haven't homeschooled before, so I learned a lot about homeschooling and the law and the provisions. So it is an important policy to have. It's important to get it right. And I think I like the changes that we landed on.
Yeah.
So.
Since it's a legal change, I have a hard time saying a lot. Like I have a lot of homeschooling friends in a lot of different states, and Massachusetts is probably one of the most rigid states when it comes to homeschooling and homeschooling law and what parents have to present and do in order to homeschool. So, you know, this feels heavy, but at the same time, I know that it's legal and that we're required to do this. So I don't think there's a lot I can add to it.
You got anything?
I mean, I guess the only question I have would be, I know it's legal, so I guess I would ask the question from the perspective of the district. If there was a situation that required a child be removed from the school prior to, like it says, at least 14 days before removing, what is the outcome of that? Like if a kid, for whatever reason, a parent said this is no longer where my child should be, and they say after today, not coming back, what is is there implications to that? Are there consequences to that? Like clearly the law has an opinion, but in real world, what does that look like? Do we know? I mean, I'm sure you do.
So, you know, we want to make sure that we have a home education plan in place before we say that we're going to sort of technically unenroll a student. But I think the way it plays out in practice is that, you know, a person may tell us that they're going to homeschool, and then that student doesn't come to school for a few days, so then we call them up and we say, you really need to either send your child or send us a homeschooling plan.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the way it works. you
That's
know.
reasonable, because it was like 2 weeks. I mean, I would assume that in some cases, parents are like, this is where we have to end our journey, right? So, for whatever reason.
Sure.
But that's good to know, that there's like space in there.
Yeah, I think you're right about, like, that, when I was reading this, that was my one concern.
Yeah.
I know people who have removed children from school districts, I
Right.
won't say this one, because of things like racial tensions and stuff like that.
Right.
And in those cases, the parent isn't gonna wait 14 days
No.
to bring their kid home
Yeah.
and put them in an environment where they feel the child is safer and more supported, right? So, yeah, thank you for asking that.
So I would say if anybody has any hesitation or any reason why you want to think about any of this more, I would go with putting it off another week. If people feel comfortable with this, given that it is a legal change, I am also comfortable with moving it forward. So does anybody have any thoughts?
We talked it through, so I'm comfortable. So
Yeah.
really, yeah, if you feel
Well, if it's the law, like,
Right.
I don't have to
You
feel,
log
I don't like
policy
some
anyway.
laws, but that doesn't change it, right?
right.
Yeah.
So is there somebody who feels that they would like to make a motion?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Move to approve the revised policy IHBG, home education.
A motion by Leah, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Holly, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. And that so passes. Thank you to Mr. LeBrod for all of his work with our homeschoolers. Thank you. That brings us into the Marathon 3C paraprofessionals. Mrs. Dubois, it is wonderful to have you back.
Hello. We had an exciting evening at Marathon Kindergarten Orientation. So that was last night and tonight. So it's always wonderful to have that back in person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I see you've got your marathon
Well,
shirt on.
it was Spirit Day today, and I debated, you know, should I wear this or not? But you need to see that we celebrate. So, and same with the kindergarten parents tonight, because Mrs. Dickerson and I both had our marathon gear, and we talked about, you know, we will learn your child's name, and that's a good thing. We're part of their team. It's a little different than when we were in school, and just hopefully they feel a little bit more comfortable about where their kids are coming to school.
I feel like it wasn't that long ago, although it was, where I was sitting there and you were welcoming my...
And I can say honestly now, like with this group, we have children that were at Center School, and I know these children were born, and now they're coming into kindergarten. So time is just, it's passing pretty quickly.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So I am here before you because we continue to grow. As we continue to grow and enroll students, that often includes students with significant needs. And we have recently added to our population of students with significant needs, and we're not able to support them with our current staffing. So what we are looking for is 3 additional C paraprofessionals. That might seem like a lot to you, so I'm just going to talk about some of our numbers and our changes that we've had over the course of the year. So remarkably so, Marathon Pre-K to 1 now has 710 students. Wow. Right, isn't that a lot?
It's crazy.
So at the K1 level, we have 602. Our significant needs population is just 3% of that. So it's not a large percent, but when you have that large number, we have about 19 significantly needy students. So that's where what we currently have with our staff, we're not able to absorb, if you will, the support that these students have, hence the request. And our enrollment varies with who joins our school. We draw a wide variety of families, students, needs, and it's fantastic. They love our district. They have great things to say about our district. But we need a little help as these people are enrolling to best support them.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Just kind of more for the audience, which
Yes.
is, what is the definition of a child with a significant need?
So a significant special need is someone who perhaps has limited verbal abilities. They might have limited motor abilities. They might have a variety of disabilities. In our state, we do classify disabilities. You might have autistic children. You might have children with Down syndrome. You might have neurologically impaired children. Children that are deaf or hard of hearing or vision impaired. So it's a lot of those larger, if you will, disability categories that are typically your significant population. Some children are higher functioning, if you will, and are able to communicate quite well. You might not necessarily know that they have a significant disability. And some children you can tell because physically they might look or move differently or communicate differently than others.
Thank you very much.
And in our school, we work on including our children in as much as they can in different aspects of the day. So it will vary based on what's appropriate for the child, you know, how much time, because they require specialized programming, specially designed instruction. So what their programming looks like is individual to their student needs, and they have a plan that sort of carries out, outlines what that plan should be.
Are these positions, I remember our meeting from the summer, August 8th, and I believe on that presentation, it was 3 paraprofessionals. Is this aligned with that, or is
No.
this a separate, a whole separate?
A whole separate based on a new enrollment.
Do you need 6 new paraprofessionals,
Well,
or do you think there's
so-
actually more than that?
So these are, our district has varying categories of paraprofessionals.
Sure, yeah.
So what we came in August, those we were talking about in the future are B paraprofessionals.
Sure.
Our first level is A, general education. They support, you know, first grade classrooms, kindergarten classrooms. The next level is a B paraprofessional, special education paraprofessionals, moderate learning needs, you know, which can include academic as well as behavioral, but little bit more support, but not that significant in support. The next level is the C paraprofessional, which is what I'm asking for tonight. Those are paraprofessionals with ABA background training so that they are able to do discrete trials, they're able to do a significant amount of data collection. So it is different than the summer.
Okay.
The summer, when we talked about our projected special education plan over the years, the B paraprofessionals that were asked then, and you know, will come in the future, were 3 B paraprofessionals to support our moderate learners throughout our varied classrooms. So this is separate, and it's which you're right, it's a lot.
Yeah,
but
no, I
as
don't
our
think
our population grows, we've sort of got to respond to, you know, who our students
Yeah.
are and what's happening with
I
that.
would never say it's a lot.
Yeah,
I say you,
right.
you need what you need.
But sometimes, so, right, we cannot function without our paraprofessionals. They are tremendous, they're incredible, but sometimes if people just see the number, I think the perception is you have so many, why can't you make it work? So they each have a specific, unique role, and based on what students required, you know, that's what we are sort of deploying our paraprofessionals to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I would say thank you for all of that additional information. A couple things that I think,
Yeah.
one is absolutely essential as a body that we are able to meet the needs of students' IEPs and to support inclusion and to support all the important things that you are doing. There are very talented paraprofessionals are a big part of. And I'm assuming that 3 was a specific number chosen to meet IEP needs, which
Correct.
is a huge, I mean, it's obviously, I think, a kind of an ethical piece that we want to make sure we're meeting kids' needs, but also a legal piece to meet IEP.
And so this is multiple move-ins, you know, and that's what's happening. As children are enrolling, this is to help support multiple move-ins.
That was going to be my question. So these weren't necessarily here in September, and we've been trying to limp along. These are people who've come in.
Yes.
And it's not one-to-one necessarily, but...
Some it might be.
Yeah.
You know, and as children, you know, transition to us from an out-of-state and in-state IEP, you have so much time to review it and make adjustments. But these are significantly needy students, so there will probably be very little adjustment.
It's so important to meet the needs, but especially in the early years. I mean, if you need this, you need this, and you know, I appreciate you coming forward and asking for it, even though it is in the middle of the year, and you know, I would be curious to talk about the funding.
So that is Susan who's going to talk about the funding.
Thank you for including that ahead of time. I appreciate that.
So for the remainder of this year, we'll look to both the current operating, but also to the grant to fund the rest of this year. But since we have not gone to town meeting on our operating budget, the look ahead is solving next year as well. As you know, when Dr. Zaleski comes before and makes her budget presentation, she'll have, these are the positions that were needed prior to, which would include this, and these are the positions that will be needed newly for the upcoming budget year. So in an effort to keep us from already falling behind 3 positions for the next budget year, what we could look at are the revolving accounts. So you saw in the memo that there is room potentially to increase the use of our revolving by $255,000, and this would use $112,000 of that. So the committee could increase the 24 recommended budget, but then also increase the offset using the revolving accounts, so that we're not asking the community for any more of an increase in the budget process, but yet these positions would already be included in the next budget year.
Thank you.
Question about that. So tonight we're just looking at FY23. The FY24 discussion will come back perhaps on
Tonight, what you're looking at really is the CPARs for Mrs. DeBow to move forward, but also to put in your mind how this will be paid for, not only this year, but in the next budget year. As you mentioned earlier, the select board is still not made decisions on the FY24 operating budget. So I believe in the future there will be more discussions, and this could certainly be part of that.
Are these folks coming in now? Like,
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that was clear to everybody, but it wasn't.
We don't get to say, hold on.
Yeah, no, that's what I assumed. So I was like, okay, I'm glad that these folks are gonna be in there ASAP for your kids.
Yeah, give us a minute. No.
Right.
No, it's not gonna happen.
I appreciate this coming, and I don't think we've ever, could potentially ever in the history that I've been following the school committee, denied any request like this. I think it's important to note that we do make approvals like this as needed throughout the year, and certainly I expect we'll probably see, if not you, one of your colleagues next year, mid-year cycle for things that are unanticipated. So, any other questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion that somebody feels moved to make?
Sure. Let me find the exact wording here so I don't mess this up. Move to approve the 3 additional ABA special education paraprofessionals for Marathon Elementary.
Thank you very much.
Motion by Jen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is
Thank you very
unanimous.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for explaining things. And it's always wonderful to see you.
Oh, yes. And just taking a minute to talk about the ESB too. So much work will go into that, and I can share that even when we left Center School, it was sad for staff because that's where they had been, even though we had ice in the heater, broken windows, I mean, all of these challenging things. So we toured the building, did a lot while there was just construction blocks, no paint, and I envision that will be the same thing for this building as you're sort of setting up a new community. Where's your space? Where's your new home? And our teachers had a lot of participation, representation for things that they wanted in the building. Granted, not everything can happen. Like the pool was a joke, that didn't happen. But yet, as much as you can, we work to incorporate things for that. And the greatest example is our library in terms of where's the vision, the bathroom, you can see the teaching and learning space. I mean, that's in the art room. Like, those are great examples of how teachers really designed their space. So in that design phase, when you get there, that's the really exciting part, to start talking about all those, things that will become reality. So that's an exciting thing to happen.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for giving us that insight.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's something that I hadn't anticipated, the sense of loss, but when you think about it, they had been there for years. So you didn't remember the building and the challenges, you remembered all the great times. So it was how do you set and recreate that in your new space? So that's important, and it will happen. Yeah. All right, I'll let you carry on. You've got lots to do.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Yeah, have a good night.
Good night,
So that brings us into the superintendent's formative evaluation indicators report. So,
Okay. So I'm just going to put the indicator itself up on the screen and then talk to you a little bit about the evidence that I've already presented to you. As you know, there are 4 areas, and under those standards, there are indicators and there are elements. They changed the superintendent's evaluation a couple of years ago and eliminated the elements and put in indicators. So each year I choose some from Standard 1, Standard 2, Standard 3, and Standard 4, which we did last summer, and then you approved them. So we'll start off with all of the Standard 1 indicators, and those fall into the category of instructional leadership. So the first one I chose was 1B. And 1B is sets high expectations for the content and quality of instruction and empowers all administrators to do the same, such that instructional practices throughout the district are engaging, inclusive, and personalized to accommodate diverse learning needs of all students, stays informed of new evidence-based instructional practices and provides resources and supports to implement them as needed, monitors principals and instructional staff in support of these practices through observations and feedback. And so some of the evidence that I have presented to you under that indicator, my presentation from opening day, and I thought we had like sort of 6 banners there of the kinds of things that were important to us in terms of growth, and those weren't necessarily academic, but some of them were, SEL based or cultural proficiency, those kinds of pieces as well. We had a really lovely professional development day on November 8th, and the theme of that was All Means All. So you can take a look at the slide decks from that. PBS in the district is really moving along. We are sort of in phase 2 right now. We might have hoped to have been in phase 3, but the pandemic, I think, slowed that work just a little bit. But our implementation is at 80% at this point in time. I included Mrs. Burley and Mr. Labrad's $100,000 SEL grant, which is really helpful, I think, in moving some of the work forward. One of the things when we brought her on was that she had no budget. And so, when we came across that grant, it was a competitive grant, and we really did not expect to get $100,000. We were just hoping to get anything. And so now we're able to conduct a needs assessment. We're doing all kinds of consultation and planning. And then in terms of school teams, we're going to be able to work our way to climate, which I think is a really important piece for us as well. The BERV has received 15 reports this year, and I know somewhere along the line someone asked how that has been publicized, so I'll talk about it now just a little bit. It's all over the middle school and the high school. I think, Robert, you were good enough to share with us last week that it's always in the memo. But the other thing we did that I thought was pretty clever is it is actually on the desktop of every one of the Chromebooks in the middle school. So a kid can't open his Chromebook without seeing the BERV there. So that was a pretty smart brainchild, I thought. We do have all of our HSA survey data, and if you took a look at that, and I think I shared a sample of one of the presentations that Mrs. Burley made to the faculty, I think at the middle school. And so what's really nice about that is you can see all of the assets, the attributes that we would want kids to have, things like resiliency and assertiveness, and you can see how many kids we think are in very good shape with that, how many kids are in kind of okay shape, and they're kids to watch, and then kids who really need some intervention. So it's nice to have that. I also shared with you the CRIOP, which are the cultural indicators that you can see when you instruction that you can see when you walk into a classroom. So the O and the P are observable practices, and we've been doing lots of walkthroughs with Black Print, and at this point we're getting ready to roll this out to teachers. And the lovely thing about the CRIOP, if you took a look at it, is it will show you what are the things that are nice to have in a classroom. These are just general things that, we'd like to see that in terms of cultural proficiency. And then the other things that are, these are superior things, and then there's a whole column of, if you're not seeing these things, we're sort of in trouble. We looked at that up against DESE's new rubric for culturally responsive teaching, and we have, I think, largely preferred the CRIOP, so that might be the way in which we go. Whenever possible, we've joined forces with the Hopkinton Freedom Team, and that is certainly less my work than it is Laura Tice, Jen Suker, the assistant principals at the middle school who are doing work to ensure that, you know, we can kind of align with them with kids. It's always tricky doing that because, you know, time is obviously finite. Robert talked tonight about the Respecting Human Identities course, which is, I think, a really great thing. Stephanie Harvey, who is a consultant that we've worked with both in the 21-22 school year, is back this year and has several engagements with the middle school. The middle school faculty and staff report that they like the work that she does. In terms of grade 6 math, we met maybe a week ago on Friday. We have another meeting tomorrow, and tomorrow's meeting is just middle school personnel. The first time we took a look at how would this play out starting in grade 5 and going all the way to grade 12. Tomorrow we're isolating our discussion to just the middle school. We have disciplinary literacy training that is happening. Dr. Zaleski and I have met with joint departments, so we've paired the science department and special ed department, social studies and special ed, ELA and special ed, and we have done presentations with them that help them to see what does that look like in this particular discipline and how can we be supporting this in the academic support centers, because, you know, very often our kids who are on IEPs also have some kind of a reading or writing deficit. So. And then I also included just a very complimentary email that came from one of the teachers. The next standard one is student learning. Again, student learning, this one is 1F. Demonstrates expected impact on student learning based on multiple measures of student learning, growth, and achievement, including student progress on common assessments and statewide student growth measures where available. I think this one is a big area of strength for me. As you know, I'm always looking at data, whether it's STAR data, MCAS data, local data. I think one of the things that I included in there is just a snapshot of one of what Mrs. Bilella would call a watch list. So you could see how she is recording things that's like QRI data, BAS data, alongside the STAR, alongside some of the WIDA data for some of our L students. So we collect all of this, and I think that there are many districts who might collect this stuff and say, oh, we've got all this data. But I truly believe that this is a district that uses it to drive instruction, and that makes me feel very proud. The first document I embedded in there is some of the work that our new HMS ELA director is doing. And so what she has done is she has taken all of the MCAS items from grades 6, 7, and 8, taken a look at the teachers who are at those levels and said, okay, let's take a look at, say, grade 7 test number 6. And if teacher A had 50% of the students get that wrong, and teacher B had 50% get that wrong, and teacher C only had 2% of her kids get that wrong, we're wondering why. What are the instructional strengths of teacher C? And it was interesting because you could see it fluctuate. In some cases, some of the teachers were really teaching the heck out of it. And in other cases, you thought, I wonder what's happening in that, because if we could start getting them to plan together around those instructional practices. I mean, we do say we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which we do, but how are we making sure that the instruction is, you know, sort of parallel in each one of those classes? So that data it's really exciting data to look at. And there's lots more, but I thought that might be of interest to you so that you could see it. And then I included just a couple of school committee presentations where we've shown some of the data this year as well. All right, so moving right along to Standard 2. Standard 2 is Management and Operations. 2D, under Laws, Ethics, and Policies, provides the resources and support for all school personnel to understand and comply with state and federal laws and mandates, school committee policies, collective bargaining agreements, and ethical guidelines, models this practice for others. So under this particular standard, you know that we have just gone through, I think, some turbulent times with the HTA and with CPAC relative to the budget. And what I like to say in that situation is that, you know, the directors and I and the building principals are asked to bring forward a fiscally responsible budget. So I feel like our administrative team did that, and I understand too that CPAC's response to it, and I understand the HTA's response to it. So That does, in fact, truly make sense to me. I think, there's obviously then some work to do in kind of cleaning all of that up. But as we move forward with the HTA, we will, keep doing our labor management meetings and keep what I would like to say is going to be kind of a more formalized rolling agenda for some of those meetings, because I think that will be helpful. We had our first one just the other day, and I felt like it was a positive experience with the HTA, truly. Some of the policies that we have taken a look at this year are JLB, financial assistance, JH, student attendance, JBB, educational equity, BEDH, participation in school committee meetings, JDD, revolving accounts, and tonight we did homeschooling. So I think I'm pleased with some of those too, because as I look at them, some of them are brought forward because of legal reasons, but I think others have really spoken to ethics this year. As we've looked at some of the things around financial assistance, I think that was to make sure that all means all. And I think when we looked at educational equity, I know, Leah, that was something that was important to you, and we, I think, hammered away at that policy probably for, I don't know, do you want to say 3 years?
Years, yeah.
But in all of that time, I think we've made gains in terms of ensuring that all of our kids are getting what they need, So there have been some of those things that I think are making sure that all does in fact mean all. I think some of the other stuff that's on there, we've had conversations about along the way, so I will move right along to fiscal systems. 2E, fiscal systems, leads the administrative team to develop a district budget aligned with the district's vision, mission, and goals that addresses the needs of all students. So again, you see the all means all. Allocates and manages expenditures consistent with district and school level goals and seeks alternate funding sources as needed. Proactively communicates budget rationale to staff, community members, municipal stakeholders, and the school community. Provides regular updates on implementation of budget. So in this, I have included all of the Elmwood project dates. We had many forums and visioning team meetings and all of that. The budget, as always, had a public hearing. Each week we would have either a group of directors or building principals come in and explain their budget rationale and show what they had come up with. It's the sort of traditional model that we've used. One thing that I will say about the work that Mrs. Rothermick and I have done probably over the last 5 years is each time we have gone through the iteration of the budget process, I think it becomes more and more transparent each year. As I look at proactively communicating budget rationale to staff, community members, municipal stakeholders, and the school committee, I feel like we've done that. If there is one thing that I wish we could go back and take a look at is that from the time that the packet was published on a Tuesday to the time that Dr. Lesky had a meeting with related service providers on a Thursday morning, I wish we had closed that 48-hour gap. In terms of finances, I think we've been very clear about our Chapter 70 funding, circuit breaker funding. We're going to be hearing lots more about the use of the millionaire's tax. To that end, we were lucky enough to have a luncheon exclusively with Karen Spilka, Senate President, last Friday, and there were 3 superintendents in this area and I who met with her. One of the things that is kind of hurting us in terms of our fiscal system is that 14% increase in private special education private special education costs and our transportation costs. I didn't mean to marry those two things together. And then finally, I just included a letter to our legislators so that you could take a look at what that looks like as well. And I also think that these our budgetary decisions really do contribute to, kids' performance. And we sometimes look at Student Opportunity Act, or we look at MCAS, those kinds of things. But I think locally, we're always thinking about what do kids need to achieve and grow at higher levels. And I like to think that our budget is designed annually to do that. I know our building principals put a lot of thought into that as well. All right, Standard 3, family and community engagement. I think there's only one indicator this year in Standard 3. And this is communications, supports and empowers all administrators to engage in regular two-way culturally responsive communications with families about student learning and performance. District-wide communications with families are provided in multiple formats and respect and affirm different families' home languages, cultures, and values. So you can see all of the admin council agendas for that one. I think that the admin team has done so much work, in cultural proficiency and ensuring that social emotional learning is alive and well in areas of social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know we just spoke a little bit about Jen Suker's role in the work that she does, but she is really amazing. If we have any sense whether it has to do with registration time or even, going into the following year where you have to re-register your kids, she is reaching out to families that may need something more, whether there might be a language barrier or a technology barrier, to them being able to access our student information system, PowerSchool. She is on top of it. Nothing goes out of the district to any family who needs something sent home in another language. We now have services where we have interpreters and translators sort of on call for us. So in the event that we needed to have a disciplinary meeting immediately, we would be able to get that person there to have that meeting so that a parent would have the interpreter right there in the room with them, or at least virtually in the room with them. And there are so many other things I would love to be able to tell you about Jen Suker's work, but it would be in a breach of confidentiality for families. But some of the work that she's doing is truly amazing. And again, just the $100,000, and we are co-sponsoring an equity audit with the town. So the town got $100,000 and came together with Jen Suker and Kim Polnick, and I go to some of those meetings, and so we'll be doing an equity audit, which is pretty exciting. I think that you can also take a look at some of the PLC agendas and the MCAS and STAR scores that have been shared with you, so that you can sort of see that we are really trying to ensure that all kids have access to high levels of rigorous curriculum. I hope I didn't miss anything there. And then finally, standard 4, professional culture. Make sure I'm in the right place. Yep. Okay. 4D is continuous learning, develops, nurtures, and models a culture in which all staff members are reflective about their practice and use student data, current research, best practices, and theory to continuously adapt instruction and achieve improved test results, as evidenced by empowering all administrators to collaborate and share knowledge and skills of best practices that improve student learning within their own buildings, and regularly reflecting on and improving their own leadership practice in order to develop new approaches to improve overall district effectiveness. Okay. So in this one, I did include an example of a building principal's goals, and I think that you could see in there things that involved things like disciplinary literacy, social emotional learning, and from even the school improvement plans that every single one of our building principals has something in there that's culturally responsive or responsive to social emotional needs of our kids. And that's sort of not by accident, but it really starts with the district improvement plan. It seeps into the school improvement plans. And this fall, when building principals were asked to put their goals together, one of the things I kept saying to them is just look at your SIP, because your SIP should be driving your goals. And we really did a nice job, I think, of kind of streamlining that right down to the building level. And when I talk to them about their teachers' goals, lots of times the teachers' goals are around things like disciplinary literacy or social emotional learning. So it really is that the ship is, everyone's paddling, I guess, in the same direction, which feels nice. I know that you have access in several places to the admin team goals. You can also see some of our central office teaching and learning agendas, and so I've embedded those in there. There were places where there were links, and some of those links were broken, and the links were broken in there because our math coordinator may have left data in there that would have had student names, or our ELA director would have had student names in there, so those have all been removed. And then I left in some of the meeting agendas for our 5 schools. So for example, you might see a PD day agenda for Marathon, or a BBM for Hopkins, a PLC agenda for Elmwood. And we just felt it was really important for you to be able to see the kinds of work that the building principals are also doing, because that is part of my role, is to ensure that our administrators are able to collaborate with one another. And maybe a smart thing would have been to also put in, we have elementary leadership team and senior leadership team. So an elementary leadership leadership team agenda would have been interesting to you too, I think. But to make sure that they have time to collaborate with each other and then with their people and then with the entire admin team of 25 of us now. 4E is shared vision, leads administrators, staff, students of all ages, family, and community members to develop and internalize a shared educational vision around student preparation for college and careers, civic engagement, community contributions, and responsible citizenship. Ensures the alignment of school and district goals to this vision and models this practice for others. So on that one, the one thing that I had talked about doing there is really looking at, and as you look at the indicator, you know, I give you for this indicator I would like to work with, and I geared it primarily to our secondary administrators and really thinking about guidance services for our kids, and maybe not even just guidance services, but also what does it look like for the role of our school adjustment counselors, our school psychologists, and maybe even some special education staff there. So we have, and I think that one of the things I put in this is that I would love to make this a multi-year goal, because I think that this will probably be a 3-year process. It used to be that Dr. Zaleski sort of oversaw guidance, and it kind of came to be that she was doing that because of 504s, and 504s do fall under student services, and 504s in most districts are a guidance function. But what we've been looking at is that if you think about guidance at the middle school level, it's really an academic function. And then our school adjustment counselors do sort of more of that counseling and SEL kind of work. And then we also have a school psychologist. Right now at the middle school, we're trying to sort of redefine some of those roles. And you saw, I think, in Mr. Lefebvre's budget, the need for a secretary in that office at the middle school. So I think we need to develop some kind of flow chart, so to speak, because, and I'm certainly not being facetious when I say this, we can have a student walk in who is upset because her friend has gone out and bought the exact same pair of pants that she's wearing that day, and then we can have another student walk in who says, I'm having ideations of suicide. And I think we need to have somebody who does intake, who says that the needs of this student are very different from that student. It can't just be that we have kids all sitting around a table kind of waiting to be seen because there's not an adult there who's kind of doing that work for us. So that's begun. We've also handed off kind of the role of thinking about that and doing a really solid program evaluation to Carla Burley, our SEL director, who has a lot of experience in that realm. And then that takes that off the plate of Dr. Zaleski, who is really the student services direct person and not necessarily somebody who is looking at those guidance pieces. The other place I think we're growing is at the high school level. We now have, we keep talking about the changes in our demographics, and so we may have kids, and I remember when I first came in and we did our diversity, equity, inclusion survey, we heard from a lot of graduates who said at that time, and this is 5 years ago now, they said, I felt a little disenfranchised because Hopkinton High School is such an academic place that I felt like a fish out of water a little bit because I wasn't looking for a 4-year or a 2-year college experience when I left. And so how are we going to start better preparing students with those desires and those needs in Hopkinton High School? And we have grown some programs. We do have something that we're doing with Mass Bay, some bringing college classes into our high school. And we also have kids who are going off campus and working for part of the day. So we're growing those programs, but really I think that we are still in some of the early stages of the work. So that's where we are right now, and we call that sort of CVTE, Career Vocational Technical. But I'm really excited for that work. I have to credit Mrs. Parsons. She started a lot of that in her tenure here. She did a beautiful job writing the grants for CVTE, and once you get a little bit of a taste for it, you know how to build those programs. So that's super. All right, and then the last one is 4F, managing conflict, models a variety of strategies for responding respectfully and effectively to disagreement and dissent, and resolves conflicts in a constructive manner such that all parties are able to move forward productively. Regularly strives to achieve consensus within the district and school communities while maintaining a commitment to decisions that are in the best interest of all students. Empowers and supports administrators to use these approaches in their own leadership. And what I particularly wanted to look at there was sort of bringing parents back into the loop. In the years of the pandemic, we would receive lots of emails that, I think parents were upset about choices, and I don't think that that was endemic to Hopkinton, but I know that it was happening all over the state of Massachusetts. Should we mask? Should we not mask? Should we be 3 feet? Should we be 6 feet? Should we be every day? Should we be every other day? Should we be every week? Every other week? So there were lots of things, I think, that happened, and so at some point you've got to kind of restore those relationships with the community. And at the start of the school year, I did put out 5 successive, blog entries that said, this is where I'd like to go this year, and really think about what repair looks like, and thinking about offering each other just a little bit of grace. And surprisingly, we have not had much email this year. I mean, every once in a while you'll get someone who has an individual kid problem, or, a concern about security or something like that. But my practice has always been to invite a person into my office and really listen. We had PD a long time ago with Dr. McLeod, and we had brought John Doria in, who is an amazing presenter, and he also does a whole lot of work with adult psychology and institutional psychology, and his mantra is always listen with curiosity, and I've taken a lot away from that. And I think when I bring people in, I do try to listen with curiosity. And I had a colleague many years ago who would say, at the end, even if they don't agree with you, they've heard your rationale. And if someone has heard your rationale, they should at least have respect for it. They may disagree with it, but the rationale in and of itself should be respectful. So I've left you with a very big packet of PDF emails, and I'm happy to provide other things and answer questions. I obviously can't give you a copy of every single email that has come, because there would be literally hundreds of them, and redacting them takes a very long time, but I tried to choose things from all walks of life, whether it was a bargaining unit or a parent who had an individual problem, and so you could read through them. And that's it.
So I'm going to turn then to our piece of this. If you would not mind, I know that Leah had sent you that slide, and she did. Thank you to Leah for bringing the slide, and thank you to Amanda for having created it when we went through this a couple of years ago. So it's great to be able to have that back. I am not as adept at creating visuals like that as you are. So, a couple of things about this formative evaluation checkpoint. One is just to acknowledge that it's a very different process when we're evaluating the superintendent than anybody else in this district, or anybody else that any other position I know of, where the evaluation is done in public, not just once, but we do this mid-year check-in as well. This is not the formal evaluation, because the formal evaluation is the written document at the end of the year. And by end of the year, we'll do it before the school committee elections, so that this body of 5 can evaluate on the year that we have worked with Dr. Kavanaugh on her goals and indicators. So in that document, just for people at home, is we will each do our own and thoroughly go through the goals and the indicators individually, and then we will take those, the 5 pieces, and put them together to make one final evaluation. So can you go to the next slide? The purpose of this really, it's much more informal. It's to ensure that you're on track to meet your goals and focus indicator benchmarks at the year end. It's to prevent any surprises later on. As we have done in other years, there are sometimes goals that either needed to be revised. I remember at least one offhand where we extended it to a multi-year goal in the past, that once getting into the year, the goals that you have set sometimes become apparent that it's more than 1 year's worth of work. And then are there supports that you need from us to help achieve these goals? At the end of the day, the success that you have in your position is the success that we have as a committee and as a district, so that the ways that we can support you and the administrative staff and the district is obviously vital. And really, we want to eliminate any surprises at the end of the year when we do that formal evaluation, to be able to provide that feedback. Are there any?
No, we're just going to say it too, I think.
Yeah, I think we just need that second slide.
Yeah,
the rest is, which is great, yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yep.
Beautiful mind thing going on.
Yeah, you really succinctly, like you always do. You're wonderful.
So, and we all have had the opportunity to consider these things over the past, now I'm blanking, a couple of weeks that we've been discussing this. It is a little bit slanted in terms of where we are in the year, and part of that is because the budget takes up so much of our time. We end up with this a little bit later than we intend every year, so we really, the second half of the year is really not a half, but it's February through May. So that's sort of where we are. Do you want to start?
Sure.
On my left here? I also just want to highlight that your experience with the evaluation process, you had really a couple of years ago brought us through an in-depth process to really understand it as we shifted from the one model with the Massachusetts evaluations to the other. So that's part of why I was putting you on the spot.
Okay, great. Thank you so much there, Nancy. I'll take my slide back. So, this is just a mid-year check-in. So I, went through everything. My personal process is to go through with the actual evaluation form because we're heading in that direction. So to avoid surprises, thinking myself about, did the goals look like we're on track? Do they, based on the final evaluation, and are you on track for the indicators? So, in general, I feel, really good about where we are. If I could go through specifics, but I have, there are a few cases where I was thinking about things that would help me, not tonight, but for year end. So I could just maybe highlight a couple of those things. For the student learning goal, well, before I talk about these goals, actually, in your indicators, you mentioned a goal that you like to make 2 years at the end. And that was a bit confusing with the guidance and so forth. I'm wondering if maybe that would be an actual goal for next year. Because the indicators to me are, I love when you go through that because it gives some insight into your job, and I feel like every one of those indicators feels like a full-time job all by itself, and so there's learning, but by going through them, it's really looking at how you exhibit the skills that you need in all these different indicators as a superintendent throughout the year. The goals are more things that I think, this is how I interpret it, specifics you're hoping to accomplish. So your 5 goals that you have here, to me, I would think what you'd like to put in maybe is another goal. The indicator, I think, for me, I was looking at the things that I'm seeing already this year as exhibits of that indicator and the skills there. So just food for thought. I think maybe that should be a goal for next year because I like that. But so for the first goal, the K-6 math related one, this I would also connect to the learning indicator is at year end, I would like to understand the process that we use to evaluate the grade 6 math. I have strong belief that differentiation in grade 6 would be very beneficial to accelerated learners for a whole host of reasons, but I'm not an educator. What I really want to know is how are we assessing this opportunity, and does it include the whole child? Because I think some of the soft side of the needs of advanced learners as they hit the 5th, 6th grade, when they really need to find their peers, just to keep them engaged and so forth. Some of that soft side is almost more important for me than the actual math. So I have a lot of interest in just how we're looking at that. So not for tonight, but at the end, I'd love to hear evidence of that. I think your goals, in general, are looking right on track. For the administrative team, and maybe this is a topic for a future meeting, I would love to understand a little bit more about how the vision of the graduate in the high school is part of the district vision of how we build that graduate over 12, 13 years. So I don't know if that relates, but there was the administrative team goal, and for me, I was wondering if that vision of the graduate played in. So, moving on quickly. Laws, ethics, and policies. I was actually curious again for year end, or somewhere in between now and year end, if we could get a read back on how some of the provisions of the contract that we negotiated last year are playing out. So for example, last year we added a sick bank. We added additional time for conference planning.
We added some time for bereavement. We added, and we increased the stipends and sort of re-looked at how the stipends are done. And I'd be curious, because we make these changes. We went in this negotiation and it seemed like these were very good changes to make and things to give our teachers. I'd be very interested to see how it's played out. So again, not for tonight, but like for year end. I'm almost done. Let's see. And let's see. I think just, you know, the one maybe area in the communication, I personally think that you do a very good job at communicating. You are, I believe, transparent. I'd like to make sure that we see, you know, that comes through in all the presentations that we get. Normally it does, but sometimes I think there's an opportunity for more clarity from people who communicate, who work for you. So we could talk more if you want, but there's that. And at the year end, again, to kind of round out my assessment of communication, when we get like the guidance report, I'm hoping that we can again build on the trends and not the point in time. We started looking at like, how have AP scores been tracking? How has post-secondary planning been tracking in terms of 2-year, 4-year college, military, and employment? So hoping that we can continue to see that kind of lens for communication with that. But in general, I think, I'm really happy with where we are. I think aside from all the things in this that represent your job, the ESBC2 project that is so central to the success of the district has taken a huge amount of time from you. And the fact that you can do all this and that, I think speaks to your commitment.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to start by saying I think the majority of these things you have absolutely done. Like there's no question that you are on track for year end for pretty much every goal and every indicator that I see in here. There's a couple of them that I'm a little concerned about, and I was wondering about whether we could split them or change the focus of them. So, you know, one of them is 2D, which is the law, ethics, and policies one. You know, as we know, there has been some hard relationship stuff happening, and I feel like it's not something that will easily get cleared up by May. And so being able to either redirect this goal to something that can be accomplished by May, or even just splitting it up, because the policy piece you've obviously done. We've had some really great policies, and so maybe just splitting it up and then taking the first part of it and refocusing it for next year might work. And that will allow you to kind of complete this. The other one, similar thing, right, is goal 3, has a similar kind of relationship aspect to it that as we know, has gotten very difficult. And I think you can show progress towards the relationship, but I think some of the hope that was in here is not going to be accomplished, and I would prefer you to be able to say you finished the goal off. So maybe rewording it in a way that more points towards the progress, right? Might help you then be able to get to the end of the year with that goal complete. So those are my 2 places. But everything else, I mean, you are, as always, like Amanda said, super impressive. I mean, you have so many balls in the air in so many different directions that you, your administration, your staff, everybody's working on. And you always accomplish just amazing things. So yeah, I can't find fault in anything in here. I just want to make sure that you get to close off the goals and indicators.
Thank you. And I'm glad you included the entire staff, because they work really hard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Thanks. So I mean, yes, when you don't go first, you just say, I echo what folks have already said. But that's okay. I do think that, as everyone has already said, your progress towards your goals is on track, if not surpassing expectations with 3 months to go in the school year, or slightly over 3 months, I guess, 4, 5. But the one question I had for you, and it's really not a request, it's just sort of food for thought, is that the communication goal, based on your perception of it at the beginning of the year and what you thought might happen and what has actually come to fruition, that one kind of stuck out to me from the standpoint that, I guess we only have a few months left, so I don't know that it warrants changing it at this point, so much as kind of reconsidering it, maybe going into next year about how, all right, so if parent communication is now coming in the form of something different, are they communicating through different groups in the community? I think immediately of sort of CPAC and how that group of parents in particular communicated with the district over the course of the last several months. So, I think that piece is something to think about as far as that communication and that sort of focus on parental emails that you haven't seen a ton of, as you said. So I think that what everyone has said, you spend, you must make like 10 cents an hour for the number of hours that you spend in a week on your job. You are constantly trying to do things in service to the students, which I think is huge. And so the things that you've chosen to call out and work on, you are working on, and you are largely completing the goals that you've set forth for yourself already in February. So I think you're doing a great job on that front. And the challenges of the year, no year is going to be without its challenges, is how I feel. There will always be years where you think you got it all under control, and then something happens, and you're like, where did that go? You think you planned it out right, and then for some reason things do not go the way you planned it out. So I think that in and of itself has the potential to eventually become a positive, but as you said, it's going to take a little while, and I think that from what I see, things are already getting better on that front. Communication is improving. We're copied on a lot of that communication, which helps us see that communication is improving. So, thank you for all that you do for the kids and the staff and everybody in this district. They know that you're doing a ton behind the scenes, but just to acknowledge the work that you're doing behind the scenes.
Can I ask you guys a question? Because I'm confused myself. So you're talking about the communication indicator, right?
Yes.
And so I look at the way DESE describes it, and I know Dr. Kavanaugh has given us examples of what's in the description, but I wasn't specifically thinking that like the middle column was necessarily what we're holding her to. Like I was kind of looking at the left side and assessing my observation of Dr. Kavanaugh versus the way it's described as a professional indicator, I guess. So I guess when we talk about like you're not close to the goal, I think there are probably aspects, what I'm hearing is there are aspects of the communication indicator that we're not seeing exhibited to the degree that we would like.
So I'm misspeaking. I am looking at the managing conflict indicator and thinking of it as communication. So apologies. Okay. I'm looking at it for F. That's the one I'm looking at. But as far as communication goes, the sort of focus of that was on parent communication and improving that. So I'm sorry. That's my fault for not labeling it correctly. And so, just thinking about how that piece might take on a different angle. Okay. With 4 or 5 months left in the year, that might not be the time to take on a different angle, but it might be going forward, like in the next year, something to think about.
I gotcha. And I look at it as you have, at work, right? You have big goals and you have objectives and you have the smart kind of tactical goals. Yeah. And so I see the left-hand side as kind of being a bigger description, and then Dr. Kavanaugh is selecting how to interpret that bigger description. And so when I'm thinking about how am I going to judge this at the end of the year, she's telling me where she wants me to focus. And so what I'm saying is where she wants me to focus right now, or where she wanted me to focus 9 months ago is in a different place right now. And so I just like her to refocus it to a place that she can accomplish by the end of the year.
That's
Right.
helpful. That's not how, I mean, I didn't,
It's up for
I didn't take that
interpretation.
Right,
because I was
exactly.
looking more like at the description of the indicator and the evidence that I've seen, the evidence has been provided. So I wasn't kind of limiting my assessment to the middle, but that's helpful. Maybe
Yeah,
we should
that's kind of, I
figure-
took on that perspective, like what you said too.
Okay.
Like, here's what I picked, or from Dr. Cat, here's what you picked to say, all right, this is what I'm going to focus on in this indicator. And whether that's how you intended or not, that's how I interpret it. So, yeah.
That's helpful. And this will, when we do the summative, we go through all this.
Right.
Yeah.
And none of our individual opinions actually matters. It's only the board evaluation as, you know, as a group. So we'll hash it all out. But
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about that, I'll take on your lens.
Well, and we can take on yours on it. It's fine. Mash it all together.
Multi-lens.
It's better
And I
that
do
way.
agree with you that there has to be sort of a resetting of that goal, right? I mean, we always get together with the HTA because labor management is just a part of like the way we function. But it'll be really great if we can start working with the CPAC as well. And I know that there's a lot of repairs to be made.
Yeah.
I sent a lot of questions about sustainability and how we're ensuring equity within like the PBIS framework and, you know, families that are not necessarily tech savvy or well resourced at home. And I know that you sent me a response, but I didn't have a chance to read it because homework was not helpful today for my children. I think the question I would like to ask my colleagues is how do we have an opportunity to inject more objectivity into the way that we look at these things, like the repairing of the relationships, like, you know, like how does the community feel about communications and how do they look at the teacher relations, right? Because we don't necessarily get to, I don't ever comment in public about these things, and Dr. Kavanaugh is not able to do that either. So my interest is like a holistic look at all of these things that we're talking about and thinking about. How do we inject objectivity to make sure, because we are a product of our own experiences, right, and our own perspective, how do we ensure that the way that we see it is the way that they see it, like stakeholder in the community? And I don't, yeah, anyway, I'd leave that to the group because we are, this table, especially Robert, the leadership of the community, the educational leadership, right? So we have to set our expectations of how things will happen and the way that they will happen. So my question would be, how do we bring objectivity into these topics and discussions? And as far as when we're talking about a complete final evaluation.
So I've been thinking a lot about, you know, what you said last
Yeah.
time and really kind of focusing down on it. And I've talked to Nancy a little bit because I wanted to get my head on straight. I think there are ways to do that. I don't think necessarily this year's summative, because we didn't create the expectation that that would be part of the review. But I think at the beginning of the review process, we can say we're going to take like a climate survey as part of the reviews process, right? Or something like that. Like, I don't know what's appropriate and what isn't, so I'm as much in the air about that. Yeah. Because we haven't taught, you know, it was COVID for 2 years.
Well, sure.
so we haven't ever really discussed that part of it. But I understand the concern and the want to get more information from
our essential stakeholders, right? Yeah.
Right. So what that looks like, I think I probably won't be here for that. But I think
you will be here.
Keep rubbing that in. You can have a discussion about what
your spirit will
what
be
is
here.
appropriate for a superintendent review purposes, and Like, you know, like for instance, at my work, I was saying, you know, when I get a 360, I get to pick the 4 people.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
That give feedback on me. So it's not just like everybody. It's like I get to pick the people I work closest to. I don't know if that's appropriate for superintendent evaluation, but it is usually somewhat of a good idea, especially if you can get some constructive criticism. So yeah. So
It's that, yeah, it's ideas, like, do these folks that we talk to and we are beholden to see things the way that we do collectively or individually, and the way that Dr. Kavanaugh sees them. Like, that is of great interest to me, particularly with how the budget process went this year, right? Like, there was a lot of things said about transparency and accountability or whatever, and I think it's important to consider those things at all levels, right? Like both in like the very bottom floor all the way up, and it has to start with us, right? Because it only, right? Like climate starts at the top, trust starts at the top, community starts at the top, and trickles down to the rest of us, right?
So I would say I am very much interested in a 360 view, but separate from this process. I think it is, I agree with Leah, I don't think we can shift the way that we're doing things mid-cycle, the way that we have agreed in the contractual obligations we have with all of our employees is something that feels like it might have a little bit of a bargaining piece in there if we're going to look at anything evaluation-wise for district-wide. In terms of a climate district, a 360 view, I'm very much interested not just in kind of all of us, in kind of, I think the feedback, we need that feedback as well. And I think that it's a separate, you know, it's a way for us to build positive things in looking at how we can change. And I think trust is something that kind of, it builds all around. It's part of the relationship.
Sure.
It's part of what I think that we as a body of 5 really are interested in, in many of the things that we talked about wanting to do and bringing the community along. So I do think this is an important conversation to come back to.
I don't know if I necessarily agree it should be separate. I think that it should be accountability at our level, superintendent level, at every level that we are talking about, and because it all goes around with like if we're building trust, it has to be a two-way street, right?
It does, but I think when we're looking at doing evaluations, I think if we're looking at bringing in at multiple levels of our staffing, I think there are contractual pieces.
Sure. Yeah.
That I don't think that on the fly we can.
No, that is excellent. The only reason I bring it up now is because we have this very recent experience, and like I said, everybody gets to see the situation with their own experience and perspective and background, right? Like it's, I think it's complicated. I definitely see that, but I think it's also essential.
I think the other thing too is doing a climate survey, but once again, maybe not tied to this, I don't know, may actually be surprising. Like, we don't get a lot of feedback when things are going well, right?
No,
so we don't know how many people out there think we're doing okay, and think things are going okay.
That's exactly the thing.
Correct.
It's like when you go out into the universe, I'm assuming that people aren't just like, Leah, you are doing amazing, and I love every single thing.
Maybe they are for Leah, they're not.
Well, not for me. I don't hear that, but like I'm saying, like we get to you get to hear who is interested in telling you, right? So I think that this could be good on many levels, and
I think the tricky part is that when you get one of those review things,
sure,
the people who fill them out are more often the people who are giving you the 1 star.
Sure,
because they want to vent. You know what I mean? So I mean, I appreciate the perspective you're bringing, but I also think it's important for the community to know when they put people in on the school committee, they're putting on people on the school committee to do like 3 things. Sure. And one of those things, a third of the things that we need to do is evaluate and hire a superintendent.
Budget, right.
So,
Exactly.
right. I mean, really, we only do 3 things.
Right.
It's amazing it takes 4 hours to get to a meeting. We're doing 3 things.
Well, those things are,
So-
those things cover, 4,200, freshly minted 4,200 students.
Right.
X number of staff, the community at large.
Right.
So, and then I think about this too in the way that I've heard some of the conversations go on our budget, right? Like, that's a big budget. Are we spending too much? I would never say that. Like, you could never ever get me to say that. You know, Ms. DeVoe can come in here and ask for more people, and I'll say, yeah, I trust you. I mean, right? So I think that it's also like we need to make sure that people understand the value we bring into the community, and that's also essential, right? Isn't that part of our charge?
But some of the value that we bring, I think, is our judgment.
Sure.
And I think we're all different, and we all have different communities within the community that we maybe hear more from than others, but I think we are elected as Jen, I 100% agree with what you said. I mean, I think we're here to bring our judgment and do our best to get evidence. I think personally, I think broad surveys are not going to give you more objectivity.
No,
It's
I don't
gonna give
think
you
that's
more
necessarily.
subjectivity. But I think I like the idea. I think there are definitely some places, even in this, we could talk about specifics, but where a goal, something that at Dr. Kavanaugh's level, to be successful has to have been implemented down to the classroom. So in a case of like maybe the disciplinary literacy or hearing from the practitioners, how did that go with disciplinary literacy or something? That I can see there's value because we're trying to get feedback on a program,
Sure, yeah.
But to do a broad,
Well, I don't
any
think
kind
it's,
of a-
that's not necessarily like, objectivity doesn't have to come from like my great aunt that lives here. But, like, I love her, but, But also, it could be any number of things. That's why I asked the rest of you. I don't have an idea in my head of what that necessarily looks like. I think that objectivity can be viewed in a myriad of ways. Desi has like lists and lists and lists of ideas, and I think that it can be brought in a way that is fair and helpful, right? Like that.
I think the only thing I would add to this, I really appreciate the dialogue, and I think this kind of debate will happen when we do the formative or the summative as well. But now I lost my thought. What was I going to say? Judgment. Oh yes, as elected board members, we have to. I mean, we don't have to, but I think ideally we work on behalf of the entire community. So we try to keep our personal, preferences, maybe at bay a little bit, because part of the job here is to take the long view. And I think there's a long view for, the directions we need to go in. And it's hard, when I have my parent hat on and something specific about, and I'm not saying we do this, but I think we hear this from the community. They have things that don't go right every day.
Yeah.
It happens. And I think sometimes if you're not in an elected seat, you don't necessarily have to think about the long view. But like some of what we decide and some of what we evaluate in Dr. Kavanaugh and her performance is with partially a lens of, is somebody steering us in the right direction? Like, are we going the right way? So I think there's that element of our job that we bring to the table that's different than we'll hear from people who are in the day-to-day mode, whether they're students, parents, teachers, whomever. The day-to-day lens is different.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have to take the long view, right? We have no choice. That's what we're doing with ESBC. That's what we do with all of our work. Our policies, ensuring that this policy is timeless as long as the laws don't change, right? Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that makes us hard, right? Because even, as a parent, you go, okay, if it takes 1 year to change something, that's a year in a child's life.
Right.
And that child will remember that year forever. Right? Like, we remember high school stuff and elementary stuff. Like, I'm in, my late 40s, and I remember high school stuff and elementary stuff.
I try not to remember.
Well, but that's my point, right? So, you know, we know that, you know, on a personal level, we know that that year that we're asking that parent to wait is affecting that child. And it's sometimes so frustrating that we have to say, but that's a 3-year thing.
Right. Well,
Because,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we saw part of it with Ms. DeBose, like we heard something in August and it's February and it has changed for us, right? So we get to do the acute and the chronic.
Right.
That's kind of like a really messed up way. But it's like, if there was like a positive connotation to acute and chronic, that's what we're, right?
So I think this is great dialogue, but I think I want to push that off to another night. Because I think it's important consideration into what we're doing if we're going to take a 360 view in some way and kind of how and what and what.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I can't really comment on the rest of it because I did, like I said, I did not have the opportunity to read all the, because I thought you sent me an email and I appreciate that. So I have not had an opportunity to read all the other things that I talked about. But I know that she sent it to me. It would have been helpful if you also like came and did my son's math homework so that I could. But that wasn't what the world had planned for me today. But like I said, I completely hear all of you and I very much appreciate the perspective.
And we appreciate yours. I mean, I know, honestly, I had not been thinking about a 360 or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it set me thinking, right? And what makes sense and what's right and how do we, you know, is there something we should do that will give us some feedback that in a way that's thoughtful
and productive
right? Like, I would never have started down that road if you hadn't mentioned it last time, so thank you.
And I think it came up when Mina was on the board too. I feel like in my first year it came up.
It was in your first year.
It was, right? I remember we actually had this discussion. We've had it before a little bit, not to this intensity, but
part of what we were getting at the last time we went around, my recollection is that we were looking as a board for feedback from the admin team in kind of how our work was supporting, hopefully not supporting, but the work that you all are doing. And so I do think there are multiple lenses and ways that we can.
I'd love to hear what the admin team has to say. Like, I go into my kids' schools and I am like blown away by, like, this is Kindness Week at Elmwood and Hopkins, and like my heart swells hearing about what my kids get to do this week. So I'd love to hear more from our administrators. Yeah, that's an aside and not helpful.
Yeah,
but.
Me too. And you know, I do value all the feedback that we get. Sometimes particularly when people do have criticisms of what we're doing as a board, because I think it challenges us to think, how can we be better? How can I be better?
Sure.
And so.
Yeah, I think that all the time.
All right, did you?
I'm done.
Okay.
No.
So,
stop me from
couple of things. The one is I want to go back to the growing of the CPAC and the LPAC goal. It just, back to my meeting from last night, the LPAC has grown tremendously. Their organization, they have a solid board in place in a short turnaround time. I know that you, as well as Jen Super, were very instrumental in that, and I think that is well beyond, in terms of where you are in that goal, where I would have predicted we would be. In terms of the CPAC, I know we as a board, we've been focused very much on the relationship piece, but going back to the way I was looking at the goal is really the growing of the CPAC. Mm-hmm. And when I think back to the end of last school year, we had Jen Halliday as the chair, and she was the board. And I mean, that really, we talked at length, and she came and, a couple of times about how we can support the growth of CPAC, and I know that was a big piece for you. And even though these past few months have been uncomfortable, and even though we've identified work that we all want to do, and I know that you very much want to do at repairing the relationship, I do feel like there's a piece to be celebrated in the fact that our CPAC has grown, that we are hearing, a lot of voices from CPAC, and sometimes that's created maybe a lot of uncomfortable conversations throughout the budget process. But I think that there is an opportunity to take, where we've been, to learn from where we've been, and to look at the fact that we have a CPAC board and to look at what that does for our students. And that, you know, at the end of the day, to me is, you know, as a parent of multiply disabled children and children with multiple disabilities, I feel, and I think everybody here feels the same way, that CPAC is really vital to our community. And it's vital to us in terms of hearing from them, from the many voices. I know last year, the one thing that comes to mind is that we had the unified PE, and we did reach out and have conversation with Jen Halliday, and she, you know, she's always been great turnaround, but now we have more voices to be able to turn to, and I think that's a piece that, even though the past couple months have not, I think, felt good for any of us, really is something that should be celebrated. And to go back, you know, in June, I think it was June, it was over the summer at some point, there was a meeting where there was, you know, board elections, and it was a group of us. I was there as the CPAC liaison, and Dr. Zaleski, and I think Carol Cresco was there as well, in a restaurant where the feeling really was a very positive of, CPAC is taking off, and I think that that's the next chapter. So that, you know, kind of happiness for that. Certainly the acknowledgement of the work that has to come further, I think, is kind of almost part 2 of the goal. It's not mentioned because we didn't anticipate, obviously, the place that we ended up back when you were going through your goals back in many months. It was warm out still.
But for a while, we really were accumulating members of both groups.
Right. And you know, CPAC, it's great that they have strong, large numbers and large following now. So that's, all of us collectively here can kind of move that piece forward, but it's not actually part of your goal, to my understanding of it. The community, and I will try to, I realize that we are a little bit over time, but I do want to also highlight one thing with the communication and the LPAC meeting last night. I know that the district has accumulated, not acquired is the right word, a lot of new different tools to use to communicate with some people that it's more difficult to reach with. Jen Circa was talking about this great app that is able to simultaneously translate into like any language that anybody in this district has as a home language. And she's been really, you know, good at testing with different families to make sure the translations are appropriate and coming out with the right thing, and that it then translates their response back to her, which is she, you know, was able to find different ways to communicate. And I think that your support of that and all of that program really points to the all means all, and really trying to do that.
Yeah, another thing that she's done that's been pretty cool, when a family comes from another country and we're kind of looking at a transcript and thinking, are they covering in their 2nd grade the same thing we're covering in our 2nd grade? So we've wanted to do, you know, sort of like small assessments, and some of the folks in the LPAC now who are speaking those, you know, kind of primary languages, they'll say, okay, we'll take your assessment and we will translate it so that it actually looks like it would if you were in this country, because math here would go this number plus that number equals, but it would be very different in terms of appearance on the sheet of paper. So even the assessments we're giving kids for placement purposes are so authentic now, but she's really worked with that LPAC to make that happen. I mean, I can't imagine it happening in a lot of school districts. She's done some really good work.
You know, she has, the entire administrative team is a really talented group that you have, the strength of the district really, you know, you look at maybe almost a pyramid of kind of everybody in every level that is working together reflects back on you in some way. And I think that's, you know, we are in a very fortunate place with the people and the work that you all are doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw Evan, Lauren, Tim, like they're here tonight and they're shining stars. You know, they're all great.
That was a really good example of equity of result, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It was. Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
I don't have a lot, I don't actually think I have anything more to add on top of what's already been said. I love the comments that everybody has. I love the dialogue that we're able to bring together. I do feel like in terms of this process, the indicators and the goals are on track to where, you know, looking to the end of the year. So
Can we just ask, do you have any concerns? Because we've learned to ask this. We didn't always do this, but is there anything that you, in terms of like roadblocks or?
No, I don't really think so. If I come up with some, I will let you know.
The other piece, and I think this is a big purpose of why we do this, is to see if there are ways that we can help support you in different ways to meet some of these goals. I don't know if there are any you have off the top of your head, or if you want time to kind of bring that back to us, but certainly that's important feedback for us too.
Okay, I will think on that, thank you.
And thank you, as always, for taking all this critique in public and doing it so gracefully.
Yeah, that, I can't imagine.
I can't
Not only having to do this in public, but having to do it twice in public, and having to come forward with your evidence in a way. I mean, you're always very thorough with your evidence and your data, so much appreciated.
Well, I think putting it all together is what is perhaps most painful. It just takes so much time, and sometimes you forget some of the things that you've done.
I know, I have these visions of you, though, back from COVID, where there would be some massive document that had to be put together, and it would be like, on Monday or something, and by Wednesday you had, the whole thing together, so. All right, let's move then into old business. The only item we have there is the intent to travel to Iceland, Denmark in the leadership conference. Dr. Kavanaugh, I know we had provided some feedback at our last meeting on that.
Yes, and so I reached out to Charlotte Shire, and she and I actually had a very lovely meeting. She's been doing these trips for a long time, and when she started doing them, I think that there were more teachers at the high school who were engaging in the trips, and now they're down to a few who are kind of willing to do it. And I think it is, an awful lot of work, but I think for her, she's a person who is not only pretty passionate about all that environmental science, but in a previous life, she worked at Nature's Classroom, so she is a huge experiential learner kind of a fan, and so that's what I think drives her to do this kind of work. She and I both agree that it's a lot of money for a family to come up with. We talked a little bit, Amanda, about the issue you had raised last time, is that, if there is a kid who's super passionate about this, this might be that kid's only chance to be able to do this, because a family of 5, they can't afford to send 5 people. And this is a trip that's kind of tailored to your interests. So if water in our world is your thing, and you're going to go to Iceland and Denmark, and then to, the final summit in Berlin, that's a pretty cool thing that is probably not going to even be able to be replicated by a family. These trips for the teachers are a lot of work. I reached out to some of my colleagues, and even though Charlotte and I talked about how, sort of in a really informal way, if there was a kid who wanted to go, historically they've been able to kind of come up with funding for that student. But I know that leaves cracks that we could lose a kid through, because we never knew that the kid wanted to go, or the kid had a conversation with a building principal or a teacher, and we were just like, oh, I don't know. Maybe the kid just walked away and said, I'll never be able to come up with $7,000. But she did give me good examples of how early on there were kids who had particular special needs who wanted to go, and in order to be able to allow those kids to access the trip, they made all kinds of accommodations, and those kids were able to take those trips. So my colleagues in other districts did say that things like, if the school committee could set up a timeline. So instead of coming 1 year ahead, you could come 2 years ahead, which would give kids some additional time to do that. You could set a cap, for example, and say maybe 6,000 is the highest trip that we would, sort of ever allow to happen. There are also in the community people who are still walking around with those vouchers. So I know that when Charlotte started talking about this particular trip, someone with a voucher reached out and said, hey, I'm really glad that you're doing this, because I would be happy to sell my voucher to, a kid who wants to go. And I don't know if there would be any discounting or whatever, that there would be, an arrangement between the owner of the voucher and students who want to go. So I think at this point in time, you probably have choices to make. You could approve this trip. You could say going forward, you would like for the administrators to think about a way to come up with a formula for what does financial need look like. we could establish some kind of an account and we seed it, and there's an award of, X number of dollars for one student, per trip per year. But, those kinds of decisions, I think, are long-term decisions, because, we took us 3 years to write an equity policy. And it took us probably 15 meetings to look at the financial assistance policy. So this will come with a lot of hard work, I think. And then the third choice might be to say Hopkinton is a district that will just not do these trips anymore. And that would be one that I think would probably sadden me, because I think that there's a lot to be gained for students in going on these trips. And they're probably not for everyone,
Yeah. I think some of the stuff that you've brought up is good fodder for conversation and for long-term thought. I think my concern is we have these conversations and then they get lost. And then this comes up and then we have the conversation again. So it's not so much about this trip as about making sure that the conversation happens and that we continue to have it. So the next time a trip like this comes up, we can say, okay, this is how we're dealing with this, because we have had all of this decision making around it, right? So that's my hope. So I'm not gonna not approve this, but I just don't want it to be like, oh, we brought it up for the trip and now we forgot for 6 months, and now the new trip comes up and then we're like, oh wait. So yeah, so that's.
I don't know how you would feel about handing that task off to the policy working group.
I was gonna say, we always
The
intended.
policy working group is like,
I know. No, I was. It's funny you say that, because I was already thinking like,
surprised,
this
yeah.
seems like it falls sort of under the purview of the policy working group.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dr. Kavanaugh, for saying that out loud. But it does. It really does.
But
I think it's appropriate.
We were gonna look, we tweaked the financial policy.
Yes.
And we always intended to see, lived experience this year, like how many more people came forward. And so we have a revisit at the end of the year, and I kind of feel like this can go into that.
Yep, I think so too.
I don't know. Susan, look, I don't need anything else to talk about. I gotta go to school, I gotta do.
I like the idea of handing this off as a policy piece and kind of wrapping that in with the financial stuff from what we've been going through. I also like that there's actually a concrete suggestion in there of ways that we could address this going forward. The EF vouchers, I remember when the whole thing that earlier on in COVID, that these are families who lost money because in many cases, or some cases at least, they don't have children in the public schools anymore. Their child's trip got canceled because of COVID. Many cases where they had saved in a way that maybe wasn't easy, might have been a little bit of a stretch for them. In EF would not. This was not just a Hopkinton problem; it was a statewide problem that made the news, and so those families have vouchers, and to be able to offer them the ability to pass those on, it does seem like a real bonus to me. Beyond, just the merits of the trip alone, which I know.
Yes.
Charlotte Shire's trips are always phenomenal that she brings forward.
Right, and that's the other piece. I think we do need to take it on in the policy working group, but obviously this teacher has already put a tremendous amount of effort and work into putting together this trip, and whether we think it's pricey or not, I think it's been the practice of the group to approve these. She put it together in good faith, thinking that here's a great trip. I just need to put it in front of the school committee. I would hate to discourage anybody from putting these together by saying no to this one without having something to back it up, like a policy or something that we could create later on and say, here's a criteria by which we'll approve things that are, starting to push the limits in terms of expenses, or at least in our opinion.
I did ask if there's an itemization of costs on this trip, because it is a high ticket item, this 7,100 or something. And the answer was no, EF Tourist doesn't provide, because there are multiple flights, and another question I asked was, could we maybe go from Iceland to Berlin and not do the Copenhagen? There wasn't a strict itinerary yet. It has not, it's, I think it's listed as topical activities or whatever. So as Ms. Shire said, probably sea level rising, something like that in Copenhagen. But, you know, I had asked about, you know, it's kind of long, could we shorten it a little? But there are no customizations available. So, I mean, I had to ask.
Sure.
Because it is a lot of money. But I agree with what you guys have said about this trip this year, this vote. I also agree that we need to get on this. I mean, when we did the financial aid policy in the beginning of the year, we didn't include this. We probably should have, but I think
it's good to bring it back.
You couldn't have thought of
But it was
every single thing.
It was a push we had to move that forward to be able to help families this year, and taking on that extra piece probably would have prevented us from being able to implement for families this school year.
Right, we were trying to move quickly, yeah.
Well, how would you decide what the limit was too, right?
Right.
Like, this is, I mean, $7,000 is clearly a lot. But what's the cutoff?
Right.
Between 0 and 7,000.
Right. How do you pick a number, right? Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciated your point very much from last week that Dr. Kavanaugh had repeated about, for some families, they would never be able to do this as a family, but they might be able to find a way to allow their student to do that. That's a little bit of a different take on the financial piece of it. Cause
there's gradations on all of this, right?
Yeah.
But
And one thing I had mentioned that Charlotte had explained to me too is that EF Tours does have this sort of GoFundMe. There's no surcharge for it. So if you had a 2-year out planned trip and, you know, a grandparent wanted to give you $100 or, you know, something, Christmas came, whatever, you can just keep putting money in there and kind of see where you are over time as well.
When we used to do the China trip, it was anticipated once every 4 years. And when you started Mandarin in the high school, you were told freshman year, listen, we're going to go in 3 years. You're going to want to go. It's going to cost money. So if you have an opportunity to like get a $25 Christmas gift or whatever, ask for this. You know, so she, even though not everybody has the ability to earn, you know, there are all sorts of factors in every family, but planting the seed early for a long planning horizon for some families makes a big difference. This is a little different because I don't know if you know when you're a freshman that you're going to be really interested in environmental science. But it might be something to consider how these kinds of opportunities are introduced during freshman orientation. Because that may be an opportunity for Mr. Bishop to say, part of what we do offer periodically are trips, and planning in advance might be helpful.
I would guess COVID complicated the timing of this as well. Like I would imagine that they were like, we don't know when we can announce this because who knows, right?
But I think no matter what, right? Like we want this to feel accessible to students instead of having students, you know, in 9th grade shut down and go, there is no way even in 3 years that I can make $6,000. You know, my parents.
Yeah. We don't have extra money.
We don't have that kind of situation, right? So just things that make it into a possibility is important. Okay. Thanks.
Is there somebody who would like to make a motion to approve grades 9 to 12 a trip to Iceland, Denmark, and leadership conference in Berlin, Germany for July 3 to 15, 2024?
So moved.
Motion by Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So that passes, and thanks to Charlotte Shire for bringing this forward and for being patient with us.
And thanks to all of you on her behalf.
Yeah, and thank you for reaching out to other colleagues and getting ideas. I really
it was helpful.
Great. If nobody has a burning future agenda item right now, I would ask that maybe you could email them to me just in the interest of time. I will share, it was really lovely to have Mr. Bishop here earlier. He and I walked in together in the elevator. He was predicting that it was an earlier meeting, and I did say, I didn't want to say that out loud, but I accidentally might have said it does look really
You jinxed our no-hitter.
I did.
She's owning it right now.
I'm owning it. But that then brings us into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Leah. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those pass. And that brings us down to adjournment. Is there a motion
So moved.
Motion by Jen to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Yes.
And I also, and we are adjourned then at 9:53. Thank you very much to everybody here and everybody who's watching from home, and to those who are about to have a February vacation, including Robert. Enjoy the break very much, and I'll see you all at our next meeting on March 2nd. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
So are you taking a trip?
No, I'm going to Saratoga.
I have not.
Last February.